Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 3 hours of stories. I hope you all enjoy them. I recently did a poll in my community tab asking how everybody would feel about a 3-hour video every Monday night. The results were overwhelmingly positive, so that is the current game plan. You can count on a new video every Monday night. Be sure to also drop a comment letting me know how you feel about that, because your feedback is the most important thing to me when it comes to changes in schedule or video style. Anyways, if you do enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a like rating. It only takes just a quick second. It lets me know I'm doing a good job, and I just really appreciate it. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post videos just like this one every Monday night. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Like many children growing up, I had an imaginary friend. In the mid-90s, a few years before I was born, my parents moved into a very nice home in the Midwest boonies. The remote location significantly cheapened the property, and my parents were able to afford it alone off my dad's income. He had developed a now still relatively popular website that was growing fast at the time. The nature of his work didn't require him to leave home, so the remote location was not an issue whatsoever. Because they were so financially secure and my mom no longer needed to work, they decided to have me. The house was admittedly pretty isolating. The neighbors' properties were hundreds of yards away, and most of them were pushing elderly status. All their children were grown and lived their lives somewhere else. Yes, I had friends growing up, but I only saw them at school. I didn't make my first friend until I was in kindergarten, let alone actually stood face to face with another child my age. But because I only saw other children at school, it prompted me to conjure an imaginary friend. I remember naming him Samwise, after the Lord of the Rings character. My parents were huge fans and had read the books to me. They even took me to see it when it first released in theaters. I'm sure other moviegoers were confused as to why a couple had brought their 6-year-old child to see Lord of the Rings, but I loved it. I know this sounds creepy, but to me it wasn't. Samwise and I played in our acres of backyard forest gathering ancient artifacts, broken glass and rocks in nearby riverbeds, hunting with bow and arrow forged by the heavens to slay the legendary mythical lion, my late dog Sandy, who enjoyed retrieving the foam sticks, and generally partaking in other grand adventures to embark on together. At first my parents were supportive toward my imaginary friend phase of life. I'm sure they were aware of the isolation I was feeling, and assumed this was a healthy outlet. When they set the table for meals, there would be 4 spots instead of 3. They even went to lengths as far as putting together an extra meal for Samwise to eat. Now that I look back, that may have been why we ate leftovers so often. Either way, their reaction was positive. Sometimes too positive. One time my parents had set the table for dinner. This time there were 5 plates of food. I remember asking, "Why are there 5 plates?" Well, Micah's gotta eat too, buddy," my dad responded. I didn't know who Micah was. I had never even heard of the guy. I looked over at the usually empty portion of the table that now contained a plate full of food and silverware. My parents looked at the spot too, making facial expressions as if reacting to someone. "Francis, could you please get Micah some water?" my mom asked. I got up excitedly, knowing they were playing a fun game of pretend with me. I filled 2 glasses of water for Micah and Samwise, and brought them over to the table, returning to my seat. My parents began smiling and glancing at me. "Oh yeah, that's Samwise, Francis's friend." I chuckled, filled with joy. I waved toward the new empty seat. "Hi, Micah," I said giddily. "Yes, he is the sweetest," my mom said in reference to me. My parents were amazing at playing along. It felt real, like there really was somebody there. They would small talk with the absent figure and occasionally laugh and nod their head in response to nothing. Then they looked at me. For an uneasy period of time, their expressions became confused. "Francis, be a good boy and talk with our guest." Mom had suggested with a low-key tone that suggested if I didn't, I would get in trouble later. I had felt anxious at the sudden request to socialize with something I couldn't see or hear. I was questioning whether this had turned into some psychological form of punishment to show me how annoying I was with Samwise. But that didn't make sense. My parents liked Samwise. I froze up in the confusion, bouncing my glances between my mom and dad like a tennis match spectator. They both had looks that said, "Well, get on with it." The awkward silence and embarrassment of the moment appeared too much for them. They dropped their attempt at making me communicate with Micah. "I'm sorry, he gets a little shy sometimes. Francis, why don't you go to your room for tonight? Don't forget to bring Samwise." I went to bed feeling guilty and confused. A swirl of emotions pulled at my prepubescent heart. I tried to forget about it and went to sleep, but something woke me up. It was my parents talking and laughing in the dining room. There would be long pauses and equally long responses. They would periodically chuckle in the ominous silence, as if they were talking to someone on the phone. Then I heard my dad. "See ya, Micah." And the front door slammed shut. After that day, my dad would tell me he was going out to see Micah. What they did together, I have no idea. Other days my parents would invite Micah over. Those days I would sit in my room and listen as they conversated with nothing again. Day after day, night after night, until one day I was suddenly awoken from sleep once more. My dad was yelling outside my closed bedroom door. I remember hesitantly calling out to my dad. His response was blaring. "Stay in your room. Don't come out." I was scared. I was scared because my dad sounded scared. I had never heard panic in his voice like that. He continued shouting, "Go, leave." And like every night, Micah came over. His visit ended with a shutting door. Their imaginary friend must have done something bad because the next morning, my parents told me he wasn't allowed over anymore. But of course, in the mind of a confused child, I didn't know what to believe. I knew Micah wasn't real because I never sensed his presence. Obviously, if he existed, I would have seen him, heard him, smelled him, you know? Because of this, I bottled it up inside as my parents attempted at convincing me that none of us were allowed to have imaginary friends anymore. My parents never spoke of Micah again. They never even acknowledged that he had ever visited our home, just like I hadn't when I was 6. A recent incident caused me to remember this story and countless others, but I can share a few that absolutely stood out to me as odd. A few years ago I went to a theater to see an independently funded film. Because the film was independent and wasn't advertised heavily, only a few theaters had showtimes for it, the closest theater being an hour away. The movie theater lobby was packed and I was afraid the movie I drove so long to see was sold out. I approached the ticket booth and nobody was there. In a frantic attempt to obtain some tickets, I searched around the halls of the theater for whoever manned the ticket booth. Outside the numbered theater doors, a theater employee found me first. To my surprise, he introduced himself to me with a tight grip on the shoulder and a question. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, speaking formally with an accent of anger. "Why? What did I do?" I asked, confused. I thought a prank was being played on me. "You have to buy a ticket to see a movie. You've rudely ignored my coworker in the booth. He told me you just walked right past him, and when he told you to stop, you just kept going. So please exit the theater before we escort you ourselves." He was dead serious. If it was a prank, it was tasteless. As I walked out the theater, I glanced at the ticket booth one more time. Still, nobody was there. Another instance of me being rude. I was checking out at the grocery store, found an empty line, set my items on the counter and waited as the cashier rang them up. But the whole time she gave me annoyed glances, scoffed at me a few times even. It might have been because I accidentally hid an empty card in the way of the cashier aisle with mine. I was honestly too lazy to move it by hand. The weirdest one was at my own job a few days ago, which prompted this whole finding out what the hell is wrong with me thing. I work at an office call center for IT. A coworker of mine, who had worked there since I started, stopped showing up one day. Nobody acknowledged it, so I chalked it up to him just quitting or getting fired. Then I saw a photo of him on the accolades wall for most efficient employee of the month. I thought they were pranking me, and I laughed when I saw it. They asked what I was laughing about, saying that he worked really hard. I thought maybe he passed away, and I didn't hear about it, and this was maybe some weird way to commemorate him until I was cornered in my office. Shelley, an older woman, began berating me about this workplace is a family, and everyone here is equal, so treat them as such. I had no clue what she was talking about, and even considered submitting a complaint to HR. The whole thing seemed so silly to me that I began thinking of this possibly dead coworker as the office's imaginary friend. That thought is what kick-started my trip down memory lane, conjuring the memory of Micah, my parents' imaginary friend. I realized how weird that whole concept was. They definitely weren't teaching the counter-imaginary friend tactic in any parents' books I had heard of. I found the time after work to call my mom. After a few, "How was your days?" and "I'm good, how about yous?" I asked about Micah. She paused for a moment. "I'm surprised you remembered that whole thing," she said, chuckling awkwardly. She continued, "Micah was your dad's old friend from high school. He actually emailed your father congratulating him on his success as a website developer and entrepreneur. That's what sparked their momentary rekindling, I suppose you could say." Her voice grew weary over the cell phone speakers. "Wait, Micah was real?" I asked, profusely puzzled. "Well, of course he was real, but we should have listened, or acknowledged your feelings toward him. I mean, when you were a child, you obviously saw something wrong about him we didn't catch." "What do you mean?" I asked again. "Well, honestly, I don't think you liked him very much. You never talked to him, never said hi, never even looked at his direction. He would try to give you a high five and you would walk right past him. My little 6-year-old. That's why we had you tested so young." I asked her to elaborate on that. She mentioned an autism screening, one I had finally forgotten about until our conversation. Because of how I was treating Micah at the time, my mom brought me to a pediatrician in what I now understand was for an autism test. I understood that they asked my mom a lot of questions about my development, which makes sense. I remember taking tests and answering questions. I had thought this was something every kid ends up doing. They found that I was not on the autism spectrum. However, the pediatrician found something else about me. When you are alone in your room and you want to calm down, where do you go in your thoughts? The pediatrician had asked me this after the topic of hiding in my room to avoid uncomfortable situations emerged during the session. "What do you mean?" I remember asking. "Well, when I'm feeling sad, I like to imagine I'm sitting on a paddle boat, slowly drifting on a lake. It's like meditation. Have you heard of that word before?" she asked curiously. "Yeah," I responded. "Okay, Francis, where do you picture yourself when meditating?" "On a mountain with the other cool fighters," I said gleefully. I had heard of the word. It was from a kung fu movie I used to watch. The main character would meditate to become stronger. So of course, I answered based on that impression. Can you describe it more for me? She asked, paying close attention. Uh, there's birds up there, I think. You think? Tell me what you see, she said and began writing in her notebook. A couch, you, your desk, the dog photo that's on your desk. I was very careful to observe my surroundings in the office room. No, Francis, what do you see in your mind? Close your eyes for me, please. Can you see the mountains with the cool guys? Can you tell me what color their costumes are? Are their costumes stained with dirt from training on the mountain, or are they careful to make sure they're clean? I had no clue what she was talking about. I could describe what I thought I saw on the television show, but I couldn't see it as she kept repeating. That was the day I discovered I had aphantasia. Essentially, one who has aphantasia cannot utilize visual imagery in their thought processes. The best way to describe it is as such. Think of an apple. 1. Can you see the shape of the apple? 2. Can you see the color of the apple? 3. Can you see the texture of the apple, such as indents, scratches, or rough brown skin? Generally, most people can see these to some degree, detailed or not. To me, the apple does not exist. The pediatrician mentioned aphantasia to me, and my mom as if it was a party trick, nothing to be concerned about, just a little quirk I happened to have. During the early 2000s, aphantasia was not something well known or well studied. It just happened to be something she knew about, and treated it as if it was no big deal. As the memories of banal waiting rooms and multiple sessions with the pediatrician flooded to the front of my mind from a previously untapped reservoir of thought, my mom broke the news. Your father heard scratching in the middle of the night that woke him up. He thought he left Sandy outside and felt awful about it. So he got up and turned on our bedroom light, which I yelled at him for. But he needed to find his shoes. Anyways, Sandy was sleeping soundly in the corner of our room. So then we thought it was a bear trying to break in through our front door. Your dad grabbed his hunting rifle from our closet and left to check it out. Instead, he saw Micah had broken into our home and was clawing at your bedroom door like a rabid animal. Thank God you were asleep. If you had left your room, I'm sure you would have been traumatized for life. I sure was after that. I heard your father yelling, Micah, what the hell are you doing here? I interrupted my mom. Wait, why was he clawing at my door? I asked, tightening my grip on the phone. Your father and I talked about that later. We couldn't think of any sure reason, but he did mention saying something about like, there is no room for the blind, and I can show him more than he sees. While your father was aiming the rifle at him, he said his face was absolutely unmoving, like stone the whole time. That man was delusional. After the cops took him, we never heard from him again. Thank God. I thanked my mom for telling me what had really happened. She asked if I was really okay, and I told her we could meet soon for dinner. Hopefully she could explain more of what happened to me in person. I'm also posting this because I'm scared. I've started to think of more similar instances, and each time I come to this conclusion that maybe someone was there. Does anyone else have experiences like this? If so, I'd really like to hear them. If you know more about this than I do, please feel free to help me. I'm freaking out. I don't remember downloading the game. I don't remember launching it. But at some point I blinked and I was inside. At first I thought it was just some weird level. Low poly hallways, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a dull beige carpet stretching infinitely beneath my feet. It reminded me of those eerie, empty office spaces you see in dream theory videos. No doors, no windows, just hallways leading into more hallways. Then I tried to pause. The menu didn't appear. Instead, I saw my own reflection staring back at me as if my screen had turned into a mirror. My stomach twisted. I pressed the power button. The game did not close. I tried everything. Hard reset, button mash, swiping at the screen like a maniac. Nothing worked. My phone wasn't running out of charge either. It's been 87% since I got here. I don't know how long ago that was. I thought maybe I just had to keep moving. Maybe there was an exit, but every time I walked through an open doorway, I found myself in a different place. A grocery store at midnight, fully stocked, completely empty. The aisles stretched longer than they should. I turned a corner expecting another aisle, but instead I was in an indoor swimming pool. Stagnant water, pale blue tiles, the sound of distant splashing, but no one was there. I followed the pool's edge, turned into another hallway, and suddenly I was inside an abandoned mall. Every store was locked. The mannequin stood too close to the glass. I heard the soft hum of an escalator running, but no one was on it. I ran. I ran until the mall wasn't the mall anymore. I was in a children's play place now. Plastic tunnels, netted bridges, the air thick with the scent of old rubber. I climbed through a tube trying to find my way out, but the openings led nowhere. The slides twisted downward into pure blackness. I swear I heard something breathing inside them. Every space bleeds into the next, each one more unsettling than the last. Offices, parking garages, public restrooms with the doors slightly ajar, places that feel abandoned, yet recently used, like I just missed whoever was here before me. I've started noticing changes in the places I revisit. The grocery store aisles are slightly rearranged, with unfamiliar brands I swear didn't exist before. The mannequins in the mall shift positions when I'm not looking, their blank faces tilted towards me. The indoor pool now has wet footprints leading toward the darkened hallway. Something is watching. Something knows I'm here, and I think it's getting closer. The worst part? I still have my phone. I still have Wi-Fi. I can text people. I've messaged my friends, my family, even posted online. No one replies. But the messages are marked as read. I tried calling my own number. It rang. I heard my own ringtone somewhere in the distance, closer than it should be. I ran again, faster this time. My screen lit up with an incoming message. A response. It was from me. Stop moving. Mommy, why do things die? I turned to my son from the stove. He sat at the worn-out cream wooden table, his feet dangling towards the tile. Too small to touch the floor. Where did that question come from, honey? I asked, laughing and turning back to the cooking bacon quietly. Pop, sizzle, pop. Mr. Nate's cat, he replied. Well, I guess sometimes when someone or something is very old, or sick, or has been hurt in a way that can't be fixed, they die. That means their body stops working. Death is a natural part of life. I paused. Did something happen with Mr. Nate's cat, Seb? She told me she's dead. He was good, my boy Sebastian. He used to sleep all through the night. Him, a baby blue blanket. My late mom crocheted when she found out I was having a boy. And the baby monitor right next to his crib. I felt like I was blessed to have such a quiet baby. He never fussed or made a mess. Even when he began to speak, he always said, "Yes, ma'am," or "Yes, sir." People would stop and say, "You must be a wonderful mother, teaching your boy such manners at this young age." They'd smile. I'd smile. Sebastian would smile. He was such a good student, too. Always came home with a project or another. I didn't have to ask him to get good grades, he just knew. I think he knew that it was just me and him. His dad split when he was 1. Now, at 7, he had the greatest mind of all the 3rd graders in his class. His teacher called me one day to tell me he'd be the next Einstein. I was so proud. So proud to think that maybe I, a single mom, could have parented the next Einstein. When I think about him now, in this moment, I guess I never should have been a mom. Everything started going downhill when he brought up that cat. Mr. Nate's cat is really scared, Mom. She said it's dark in there. She wants to meet you. I brushed it off. Laugh. It hadn't been a few days since he brought this cat up. What was I supposed to do? I tried telling him she couldn't talk. She can't do that. Cats don't speak, right? I thought that I should put an end to it. But how? I finally decided that when Seb was at school, I would go to Nate's house and see what all the fuss was about. Walking up to the door, I didn't think anything was wrong, but the redwood and golden knob taunted me in the faded fall sun. Nate was an older man, late 60s. He'd always been there for me and Seb after Seb's dad left. He called me his surrogate daughter, in a way. His dad died when she was 20. Lila, car accident. Nate didn't like to talk about it. It definitely ate him up inside. I just didn't think it was my place to ask. Knock, knock. No answer. Knock, knock. No answer. The door cracked open. That was unlike him. Nate never kept his door unlocked because of his time in the army. He didn't like the thought of someone, anyone, random, barging into his house unwanted. He knew me, though, so I walked in. It was dark, unusually dark. Nate liked to keep a light or two on if he wasn't home, but there were none, so I assumed he wasn't home. At least somewhere home. Nate? I called, looking around the house. Sofa, side table, lamp in the corner, a reclined chair in the other corner facing towards the TV. Dark books piled up on the coffee table in an erratic fashion. His house smelled sour. I walked into the kitchen disgusted. On the island was a carcass. A rabbit, cut up in weird ways. Clumps of fur scattered on the counters. Strange symbols on the cupboards and fridge. Its legs bent back. It was still breathing. I covered my mouth with my hands and ran towards the back of the house, nearing the bedroom. Nate, there, lying in bed. Symbols drawn all over the walls, carved into the wooden bed frame. He lay with his hands folded like he was in a coffin. A photo of his daughter, Lila, sat on the dresser beside his bed, a red circle drawn around the frame, a lock of hair right in front, candles burning to emit a smoking plume that caked the room, and around. Meow. That cat came out from underneath his bed. I left, I ran, I went straight home into the bathroom and locked the door. That was until the time that Sebastian would be coming home from school. His bus should be dropping him off in front of the house right about now. I should have dinner cooked. I should be doing laundry. I should be setting the table, but I couldn't. I couldn't do that. He was dead. Nate was dead, and that cat was just there. She wasn't dead, but he was. What was going on? Mom, I found Layla outside. She said she wants to meet you. She said you saw her. How'd you see her? She knows where you are. That last sentence. Quiet, soft, calculated. What happened to my good boy? I didn't answer. How could I? Footsteps approached the door. I can hear him and the scratching at the door. It's been an hour, his little hands aching for his mother. Or were they her paws? Faint meows and begs heard from outside. Mom, please let me in. Meow. Please, Mommy. My face is tear-streaked and mascara runs down my cheeks. my phone in my hands, shaking. I'm writing this from the bathroom. The door is locked. I can't call anyone. There's no one to call. Just me and Seb. And that cat. Grief is a slow poison. It seeps into the bones, into the marrow, and hollows you out from the inside. It had eaten away at me for years, stripping me down until all that remained was the desperate wish to rewrite my own story. And then I found the way. It began with late nights, scribbled calculations in the dim glow of my basement lamp, my fingers stained with ink, my breath shallow with anticipation. The machine was not elegant. It was a thing of wires and rust, a grotesque amalgamation of scavenged parts. Old radios, gutted televisions, copper tubing twisted like veins of some mechanical beast. The core was the heart of it all, a pulsating, humming mass of stolen technology and my own crude attempts at innovation. It was ugly, but it was mine. At first, I told myself it was about science. I was proving something to the world, to myself, but deep down, I knew better. It was about them, my wife, my daughter, the ones I lost in a moment of senseless tragedy. A car swerving where it shouldn't have, a brief lapse of attention, the universe swallowing them whole and leaving me behind to rot in the silence of our home. The first test was simple. Go back one day, move an object, see if anything changed. I placed a watch on the opposite side of the table. When I returned, my past self was staring at it, confused, running a hand through his hair. Proof. It worked. Then came the next step. I traveled further, days at a time, weeks. I tested cause and effect like a child prodding at an anthill, watching the tiny lives scramble. I spoke to myself, whispered warnings, nudged fate in one direction or another, and every time I returned, reality was subtly different. A book misplaced, a conversation remembered differently, a headline that didn't match my memory. I should have stopped. Why do you spend so much time in the basement? My brother, Michael, asked one evening. He had started dropping by more often, a silent guardian against my growing isolation. I'm working on something important. He sighed, rubbing his hands together as if weighing his next words. You've been different since they died. I get it, I do, but this isn't healthy. I didn't answer. I couldn't tell him. He wouldn't understand. He had a wife, kids, a life that didn't revolve around a grief that gnawed at the edges of his soul. If only I could fix it. The day I finally did it, the day I stood on the sidewalk and saw her again, was the happiest of my life. There she was, my wife holding our daughter's tiny hand, her laughter a melody I thought I had lost forever. I felt the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. This was it. This was my moment. I stepped forward. Reality cracked. The world shuddered. The air around me turned thick, viscous. My vision doubled, tripled. My hands were not my own. Too many fingers. Too few. My wife turned to me, but her face was wrong. Her eyes were dark pools, reflections of something vast and unknowable. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I ran. I fled back to my machine, back to the basement, back to the safety of knowing I had control, but I didn't stop. I told myself I could fix it. I had simply gone too far. I needed to refine my method. I needed to try again. The addiction set in quietly, like ivy creeping up an old house. One more trip, I told myself. One more adjustment, I could make things perfect. I could make them stay. But time had other plans. I started to lose myself. The jumps blurred together. My hands looked wrong in the mirror, elongated, too many knuckles. My memories became fractured. Had I spoken to Michael yesterday or last week? Had I eaten today? Did I even exist in this moment, or had I left pieces of myself scattered through time? And then one day, I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize the thing staring back at me. The machine groaned, its wires fraying like the unraveling edges of my mind. I no longer used notebooks. I simply knew where I was going, or at least I thought I did. I had to escape. Forward, I would go forward. I would travel until I found a point where I could reset it all, where I could undo every mistake, every ripple, every tear in the fabric of time that I had caused. I stepped into the machine one final time. The universe decayed around me. The stars died one by one until I floated in a sea of cold nothingness. My body dissolved and slowly emerged back from the lost dust that came from the stars. Time collapsed, pulled inward, folding over itself like the closing of a book. And then, light. The birth of everything. I watched as galaxies formed, as the first sparks of life flickered into existence. I drifted through eons, nameless, faceless, waiting for the moment I had aimed for, the moment where I could step in and finally make things right. But something was wrong. I reached my home, my past, my life. I saw them. My wife, my daughter, Michael. He was there in my house, drinking with my wife and hugging a little boy. Who was that boy? I wanted to reach out, tap the window and talk to my family, but they did not recognize me. I was but a shadow, a whisper, a human being outside of time. I had become something else, something forgotten. I wanted to scream, but there was no voice left in me. I wanted to cry, but tears were not forming. I wanted to explain everything, but then I understood. I had never truly left. I had always been here, watching, reading, failing, a ghost of my own making, a prisoner of my own obsession. I didn't exist. Maybe I never had, and yet I'm here, being the appendage that the universe has not removed yet, the miscalculation on a perfect equation that is reality, the aborted element from time. I am nothing. For me, this whole experience took approximately a few days, maybe even weeks. I witnessed the horror of the downfalls of societies, the destruction of stars, and the rebirth from nothing of the universe. I forgot my wife and daughter's names. My brother's name is the only I remember now. I don't really know why. I used to think that traveling across time would be what would save me from the unending horror that is losing everyone you once loved. It is now. As I write this, trying to live in a strange world that looks exactly as the one I left eons ago, that I finally understand that time is not the solution to horror. Time is the horror. To preface this, I do not consider myself religious. I don't believe in ghosts, demons, or anything supernatural. I have never used any recreational drugs, nor do I suffer from any medical conditions that would explain what I experienced last night. And yet, I cannot find a rational explanation for what happened. It started around 9:40 p.m. while I was driving home from work. The roads were nearly empty, just the occasional car passing by, headlights streaking through the dark. The night was clear, no storm, no wind, just the usual hum of distant traffic and the faint flicker of street lights. I was maybe 3 minutes from home when I heard it. At first, I thought my car radio had turned on by itself. It was a high-pitched, resonant tone, like a choir holding a single note, but unnatural. If you took the sound of wind howling through a canyon and somehow made it sing, you might get close to what I heard. It wasn't a horn like the infamous sky trumpets people have recorded online. It was higher, thinner, and it carried an eerie, distant quality, as if it was coming from somewhere impossibly vast. The sound came from above, not from a building, not from a speaker, but from the sky itself. I slowed my car down, pulled over to the side, and rolled my window down. The air was still, no wind, no rustling leaves, nothing, just that sound, stretching on and on for what felt like forever, though in reality it must have been around 5 minutes. A deep sense of unease settled in my stomach. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just noise. It felt intentional. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I didn't know what else to do. As I listened, I noticed something even more unsettling. The sound wasn't fading in and out like a natural noise would. It was constant, unwavering, like a single unbroken note being played by something vast and unseen. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was too silent. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like the world had been momentarily muted. No cars in the distance, no insects, no wind. Then, just as I thought it was over, it was followed by a sharp, high-pitched static. Not regular static. It was piercing, shrill, like an old radio struggling to tune into a station that shouldn't exist. It only lasted a few seconds, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. I checked my recording afterward, and sure enough, the sound was there, until the last few seconds, where it was cut off by that same high-pitched static. I tried to upload it online, but for some reason, the phone refused to process the file. Every attempt resulted in an error message, as if something didn't want it to be shared. I don't know what I heard last night. I've scoured forums, listened to every sky trumpet recording I could find, but nothing matches. If anyone out there has heard something similar, please let me know, because I haven't been able to shake the feeling that whatever it was, it heard me too. Immaculate front lawns, pristine white houses, no picket fences because who has those in 2025? But still a gorgeous neighborhood, a suburban heaven. That's what the developers had promised when we checked out the new build. This could be our forever home, Ronan had beamed as we walked away from the 4-bed, 2-bathroom, 1,490 square foot living accommodation spread over 2 floors, with a converted attic, double glazed windows, private parking in the form of a spacious garage, and a south-facing garden with patio from where you could sit and watch the sun set over a forested backdrop on a warm summer evening with your designated partner in life as your hypothetical 2.4 children play in said south-facing garden with a joy and abandonment that most people can only dream of. I know. Disgusting, right? But look, we were at that stage of our lives, as was everybody else I knew. So I just did what any decent millennial would do and went along with it. Fast forward 6 months. I'm sat in the passenger seat of a moving van, dressed in my comfy dungarees and favorite Fleetwood Mac t-shirt. My denim jacket is draped over the headrest. Ronan's driving, still wearing that stupid grin he had when we first checked out the property. That stupid grin he always seemed to have. And a plaid shirt and chinos. His sports jacket draped over his headrest. I know, horrendous outfit, right? I didn't marry him for his dress sense. Ronan's recently got into easy listening, Tonight You Belong to Me is playing on the radio. It's creepy AF and reminds me of the film Jeepers Creepers and the old song that plays during it. My Converse feet are up on the dashboard, my head resting against the window. I'm contemplating all my disastrous past and future life choices. We've navigated half a dozen of these suburban dream streets with their lovely little white homes to get to our own. It's quite apparent that the developers have delivered on what they'd promised. It's no different from the brochures and the aforementioned model home we'd visited, with two exceptions. First, there's a brilliant red-leafed bush sprouting from the middle of the front yard. Ours seems to be the only house that has one. The second exception? The neighbors. We pull up outside our house, and that's when I spot them. An old man and an old woman standing outside the house directly opposite ours. They're quite some distance away. It's a wide street, so I can't make out much of the way in features, but the fact that they're wearing all white makes them stand out. They stand side by side and seem to be just staring into the distance. Suddenly, they turn and make eye contact, startling me. I do what I think is polite and give them a wave, but they don't wave back, so I just look away, unnerved. I think back to that day we visited the model home. We were the only ones there. Well, the only prospective buyers. It was just us and the developer on his lonesome. Superficially charming, wearing a perma grin, dressed in all white. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. It was a warm day, so why not? Ah, Roman exclaims, turning off the ignition. Home sweet home. Let's check it out, my lovely. An hour later, we are in the living room. Boxes, books, and clothes are scattered around the room. I've changed into a hooded top and pajama bottoms, and chucked my denim jacket onto the sofa, next to Ronan's hideous sports jacket. I take out a large framed photo from one of the boxes. It's of myself and Ronan on our wedding day. I stare at it for a few seconds before placing it on the mantelpiece. I turn to look out the front window. I can see the house opposite, and outside it once again, that old man and old woman, except this time he's wearing Ronan's chinos and plaid shirt, and the woman, she's wearing dungarees just like mine, and they've now been joined by another old woman, but she's in all white, just like they were earlier. They're staring ahead into space, just like earlier, and just like before, they suddenly turn their heads in sync to look straight at me. I gasp and reach out for the curtains and yank them across. I wonder if I'm just seeing things, or just not seeing the right things. The street is pretty wide, and those old people are far away, but I dare not pull the curtains back to have a peek. Not yet. Instead, I busy myself with more unpacking. An hour later, I'm feeling all that dust in my hair and up in my sinuses, so I go upstairs to take a shower. The bathroom gets all steamed up, and I open the window. And there they are. The three of them, staring ahead. The other two are dressed as before, but now the third lady, she's wearing my hooded top and pajama bottoms. "Ronan?" I yell. "Ronan!" The elderly gang look up at me. I slam the window shut. Enter Ronan. "What's up, my lovely?" Then he senses something's up. "Hey, you okay?" he asks. I gesture to the window. "Just look, open it." He frowns, complies, peers out. What am I looking at exactly, my lovely?" he asks. I take a look. The streets are empty. I slam the window shut. Dinner time. Ronan makes a mess and a lot of noise when he's eating. He loves it, but I've no appetite. What are those people? Am I losing my mind? The street's wide and they aren't close. Maybe I just need a proper look at them, so... My head's down, my dinner's untouched, and I'm on my phone. Amazon. Let's get some binoculars. But scrolling's been a bone of contention in our marriage for quite some time. The chewing stops. The clash of cutlery on crockery stops. I can feel Ronan's eyes on my scalp. I look up. His eyes lock onto mine and narrow. "Didn't we talk about phones during dinner, my lovely?" he asks. "Okay, well, I mean, it's not like you're saying anything. If you have something to talk about, then..." But he's right. And I know he is, so I don't finish that sentence and I put my phone down. We eat in silence for a few seconds until we both try and speak at the same time. "Do you..." I start. "So, he begins. We both laugh nervously. "Sorry, go ahead," he says. "Oh, out of curiosity, do you still have those binoculars? The one your brother got you?" That stupid grin returns to his face, but it's taken on some wryness. I've been rumbled, and that makes me mad. "Look, Ronan, it's not funny." He points at me, finger quavering. "I see dead people," he whispers. "I mean, if they appear and disappear, then they have to be ghosts." I yell. I'm mad, and then immediately embarrassed as soon as I say my ridiculous theory out loud. I try to speak a bit more clearly. "Aren't you worried about someone watching us?" I figure it's probably best not to mention that they also appear to be dressing like us. "Watching?" he shrieks in a high-pitched whisper. I think it's Gollum he's going for. "They're watching me?" I push my plate away and stand up. It's not lost on Ronan. "Oh, Stevie, my lovely," he stammers. "I'm sorry." I storm out before he can apologize and try and explain myself. I head for the living room and slam the door behind me. I lean against it, close my eyes, and take a deep breath in. All my disastrous life choices, past and future, appear before me like a slideshow from hell. I breathe out. I open my eyes. The room's still a mess from unpacking. I glance at the window, then up at the wedding photo up on the mantelpiece. Ronan in his three-piece suit, me in my white dress. We do look good. Well, we did, on that day. My eyes shift back to the window. I march over to it determined. Determined to do what? I don't know. But for a few seconds I feel determined. I yank the curtains open to look down upon an empty street. No elderly gang, no neighbors, nobody. The next day I'm sat on the toilet, knickers around my ankles, barefoot, scrolling through Reddit. AMA, AITA, all the acronymized fun it can offer. Suddenly my phone rings. A rare occurrence these days. I answer it. "Hello? Amazon delivery for you." "Ah, thanks, just leave it by the door." A few seconds later, I hear a car pull away. I finish my bathroom business and make my way down to the front door. I open it. There's the box on the ground, but it's clearly been tampered with. I can see the binoculars I ordered last night, amongst the pieces of styrofoam. I pick them up and survey them. The lenses, they've been scratched. I can't see a thing out of them. I don't dare look across the street and instead hurry back indoors. A few hours later and I'm doing it again, marching determinedly, this time for the first time across the street. The cadence of my stilettoed heels clip-clopping on the ground indicate determination. I've splashed on a bit of makeup on. I've ditched the baggy clothes for a white cardigan and floral dress. I'm carrying a cake box, and inside this cake box is cake. Carrot cake, specifically. It's time to meet the neighbors. I'm marching across the street determinedly, and I'm also crapping myself just a bit. And I almost completely crap myself when I come to the front yard of the house across the street. It's got the same brilliant red bush sprouting out of it, just like ours. How is that possible? It hadn't been there when we moved in. At least, I hadn't seen it. The street is wide, but not that wide. I should have been able to see it. I walk up to the front door. Deep breath. I ring the doorbell. No answer. I knock. I wait. no answer. I go over to the window. Knock, no answer. Curtains are drawn. Back to the front door, hand on the door handle. It opens. Hello? I call out as I enter the hallway. I'm just from across the road. We just moved in. A denim jacket and sports jacket, identical to mine and Ronan's, are hung up on the wall. I reach out to touch them. They feel the same as ours too. I can hear faint music coming from within the house, a tune I've heard before. I walk into the living room and the music's louder. It's Tonight You Belong to Me. The layout of the living room is identical to ours, but there are no boxes. It's not far off what we saw when we checked out the model home, but it's now also well decorated and homely. Some flowers from the bush outside are in a vase on the mantelpiece, and above the mantelpiece is our framed wedding photo, except someone has cut out mine and Ronan's faces. I scream, the cake falls from my hands, and I run. I seem to take an age to sprint across the street. It seems wider than ever, or maybe it's because you can't really sprint in stilettos. I don't know. I just need to get inside and away. I'm inside, gasping for breath. I slam the front door behind me, kick off my stupid shoes, and run into the living room. I close the curtains. I run up the stairs. I'm halfway up when I hear the doorbell. I stop. I try to breathe quietly. I creep up. 3 loud knocks, and I can't help but scream, and now I'm sobbing. I creep back down to the living room. I stand by the window. I'm crying out, resigned to my fate. There's a very gentle knock, knock, knock on the window. I slowly open the curtains. Outside on the front lawn stand half a dozen men and women. Some are wearing my outfits, the dungarees, the floral dress, the cardigan. Some are in Ronan's. All of them are wearing masks, cutouts of either mine or Ronan's face from the wedding photo. And then I can hear it again. Tonight you belong to me. I turn. Ronan's in the living room. Cake box in one hand, flowers from the red bush in the other. He's wearing a mask, too, the cutout of his own face. Or is he? I can't tell. Hello, my lovely, he says. What's wrong? Over the course of the next few weeks, half a dozen men and women became several dozen, became hundreds. All wearing masks of Ronan and me, all dressed in dungarees, plaid shirt, chinos, t-shirts of bands he never listens to. Roman sandals, that dress I bought in Bali, hundreds of them, out in the front yard, across and then down the street, just staring at us. Well, just me, because Ronan can't see them, and I'm not sure they can see him. So one day, I let them in. It was getting pretty crowded out there. The day I let them in, they just kind of drifted into the house, into our 4-bed, 2-bathroom, 1,490 square foot living accommodation spread over 2 floors. And every day they stand around wearing those masks, dressed in our clothes, presumably watching us, in the converted attic and the spacious garage, whilst Ronan and I go about our day, watching as we eat, watching as we sleep, watching as we use the bathroom, watching as we screw. I tried ignoring them. I yelled at them a few times. Once I hit one of them. They never respond, never speak, and never hit back. 10 years later, and they're still with us. There must be millions of them now, drifting around Ronan and I and our 2.4 children. They're here right now, as we watch the sun set, as our 2.4 children play in the south-facing garden, with a joy and abandonment that most people can only dream of. The road to the cabin was older than I was. A narrow strip of dirt carved between towering pines, the kind of road that never stayed tame. Every year Dad would clear the worst of the overgrowth, smooth out the deeper ruts, and scatter fresh gravel where he could, but the forest always took it back. The woods had a way of reclaiming what belonged to them. Now, with him gone, it felt like we were trespassing. "You sure this is the right way?" Ryan asked, peering through the windshield. The trees pressed in close, their skeletal limbs arching over the road like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. The truck's headlights carved out brief tunnels of visibility before the darkness swallowed everything whole again. "Yeah," I said. "It just looks different." Ryan exhaled through his nose, shifting in his seat. "Dad used to say you could blindfold him, drop him anywhere in these woods, and he'd find his way back to the cabin." I didn't answer. I'd heard that 100 times, usually from Dad himself, grinning over a campfire. You could walk these woods in the dark if you knew them well enough. Sometimes the stories changed. Sometimes it was Grandpa who built the place. Sometimes it was his father before him. But the core remained. This land had been in our family for generations. Dad had grown up here, his father before him. And yet, for the first time in my life, I struggled to recognize the road. The woods felt different this year. Thicker, hungrier. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The forest didn't change. People did. The truck jolted as we hit a deep pothole and Ryan cursed, bracing himself against the door. "Jesus, man, suspension's not that good." "You could always walk." "Funny." He glanced at his phone, but the screen showed nothing but a spinning wheel of failure. No signal. "This place is a black hole." I let out a dry chuckle. "You act like this is new." Ryan had always been different from me, the type to complain about no Wi-Fi and keep the outdoors at arm's length. He wasn't a bad hunter. He could shoot just fine, but he'd never loved the woods the way Dad had, the way I did. He adjusted his ball cap, frowning at the dark tree line. "I don't remember it getting dark this early." "It's the cloud cover," I said. The sky had been gray since noon, thick with the promise of rain. It should have bothered me more than it did. The world felt dimmer out here, as if the sun didn't touch this place the same way it touched everywhere else. The last bend in the road came up fast, revealing the cabin as we cleared the trees. A dark silhouette nestled in the clearing, untouched by time. The porch sagged a little more than I remembered, but otherwise, it was exactly as Dad had left it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "We're here." Ryan made a face. "Cozy." I ignored him, throwing the truck into park and stepping into the gravel drive. The air hit me first, cool and damp, laced with the familiar scent of wet leaves and pine. The ground was soft, with fallen foliage and dead leaves crunching underfoot as I approached the porch. Ryan lingered by the truck, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. "You ever think about selling it?" I stopped at the bottom of the steps. "No." He hesitated. "Mom mentioned it." I turned to look at him, my jaw tightening. "I said no." Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, man. Forget I asked." I exhaled slowly, pushing the door open. The hinges groaned, the air inside thick with dust and the ghosts of old campfires. It smelled like home. Ryan flicked on a flashlight, the beam cutting across the room. Everything was just as we'd left it last winter. Hunting rifles mounted over the stone fireplace, Old maps pinned to the walls, the couch covered in a faded quilt Mom had sewn years ago. The wood stove sat cold in the corner, logs stacked neatly beside it, waiting for hands that hadn't returned. "Feels weird without him, huh?" Ryan said, softer this time. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "Yeah." Silence settled between us, heavy and unspoken. Ryan exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "All right, I say we drink in honor of the old man. Then we start the fire before we freeze to death." I managed a half smile. Sounds like a plan. We built the fire outside like we always had. The wood burned low, glowing embers casting flickering shadows over the clearing. The whiskey was cheap, but it burned just fine, warming us from the inside out as we passed the bottle between us. "You hear that?" Ryan asked suddenly. I frowned. "What?" Ryan cocked his head, listening. "Nothing." I realized he was right. The forest had gone silent. No crickets, no rustling in the brush, no distant hoot of an owl, just the fire and our own breathing. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Then, from deep in the woods, something howled. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a coyote. It was deeper, resonant. Ryan tensed. That's not normal. I licked my lips, watching the tree line. The sound was distant, almost distorted as if coming from somewhere much farther away, but reaching us all the same. Then, just as suddenly, the fire dimmed. Not from the wind, not from anything natural. The flames shrank, flickered, and then guttered low as if something unseen was pressing against them. Ryan's hand went to the knife at his belt. "Luke?" Then the woods exhaled. The sound returned all at once. The rustling of leaves, the whisper of the trees, the distant chirp of crickets. The fire surged back to life, crackling bright and whole again, like nothing had happened. Ryan let out a slow breath. "You want to tell me what the hell that was?" I stared at the darkened forest, my jaw tight. Somewhere out there, something had been watching. I could feel it. I just didn't know what. The woods were different in the morning. They always were. Last night's fire had burned down to a pile of pale ash. The empty whiskey bottle beside it. The trees, which had felt vast and unknowable in the dark, now stretched upward like ancient pillars, their canopies breaking apart the gray sky above. I stood on the porch, rifle slung over my shoulder, breathing in the crisp morning air. Everything smelled damp, earthy, fresh, and oddly still. The kind of silence that felt placed rather than natural. Behind me, Ryan shuffled out of the cabin, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Coffee?" I held up my thermos. "Already made." He groaned. "You're a menace." I smirked, taking a sip. "You're slow." He grumbled something under his breath, then flopped onto the porch chairs, staring out at the tree line. "We heading out soon?" "Yeah, figured we'd set up by the creek. Always good tracking there." Ryan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Man, I still can't stop thinking about last night. That sound." I stayed quiet. "It didn't sound like a coyote," he said, glancing at me. "Or a wolf." "No." Ryan frowned. "Then what?" I took another sip of coffee. "Don't know." That was a lie. I did know, or at least I had an idea. Something had been out there last night, something that had watched us from the trees, pressed itself against the edges of the firelight, just beyond where we could see. I'd felt it. That awful, dragging weight in my gut. But I wasn't about to say that to Ryan. He pushed himself up, stretching. All right, let's get going before I change my mind. The forest was quiet, not in the way it should have been. No rustling leaves, no squirrels darting through the underbrush, no birds calling overhead, just the sound of our boots pressing into damp earth and the soft, distant murmur of the creek. Ryan noticed it too. He kept glancing up, brows furrowed, like he expected something to move between the trees. Feels dead, he muttered. I nodded. Too quiet. It wasn't normal. Even in colder months, the forest had life, but here, now, it was like everything had left. Or worse, like it had been driven away. We walked on, rifles in hand, eyes scanning the trees. A thin mist curled between the trunks, soft, almost lazy. It wasn't unusual for the mornings to be foggy this time of year, but it felt off. Too still, too heavy. Then I saw it. A deer stood just before the clearing ahead. A buck, tall and unmoving, its body partially hidden in the fog. Something about it made my stomach turn. Ryan stopped beside me. You see that? Yeah. The buck didn't move. Its antlers curled high above its head, but they looked wrong, jagged, almost too thick for its skull. I lifted my rifle, peering through the scope. Then my breath hitched. Its throat was slit. Not fresh, dark, dried blood matted its fur, a gaping wound stretching from ear to chest. But the deer was still standing. I dropped the rifle, blinking hard. Gone. The clearing was empty. I sucked in a slow breath. Did you... Ryan shook his head. I don't want to talk about it. By mid-afternoon, the mist hadn't lifted. It should have. The sun had been up for hours, but the fog clung to the trees, curling around their trunks like something living. Ryan had gone quiet. He kept his rifle close, eyes flicking between the trees like he expected something to jump out. I didn't blame him. Neither of us had spoken about the deer that wasn't there. We were headed back to the cabin when we heard it. A horn, deep, resonant. A single, drawn-out note carried through the mist. I stopped in my tracks, my breath caught in my throat. Ryan turned to me, eyes wide. That wasn't real, right? I didn't answer. The sound had come from deep in the woods, too far for a hunter, too old to be from anything modern. Then from somewhere much closer, the hounds began to bay. We ran. Not in a panicked sprint, but fast enough to get out. The cabin wasn't far. If we kept moving, we'd be fine. We just had to. Ryan wasn't there. Nothing. My pulse hammered. Ryan? The trees loomed, their dark forms swallowed by the fog. The forest held its breath. Then just ahead I saw him. A figure standing partially hidden between the trees. I exhaled dark, moving toward him. Jesus, Ryan, don't... I stopped. It wasn't him. The figure was too tall, too broad, wrapped in old hunting leathers, shadowed under a hood. He didn't move. I swallowed hard, gripping my rifle. The huntsman. He stood still as death, watching. The hounds were close now. Their howls wove through the trees, circling, tightening. The huntsman raised a hand. He pointed straight at me. My breath turned shallow. My legs refused to move. Then from behind me, Luke? Ryan's voice. I turned. He stood there breathless, wide-eyed. We need to go. I turned back toward the clearing. empty. The huntsman was gone. We didn't talk on the way back. When we finally reached the porch, Ryan turned to me. His face was pale. What the hell was that? I shook my head, trying to steady my breathing. I don't know. Ryan's jaw tightened. He turned, staring out at the trees. The mist was fading now. The hunt was over. For now. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me, but deep in my gut, I knew. A locked door wouldn't stop him. The wind shifted. I felt it before I heard anything. The air growing heavier, pressing against my skin like something tangible. The trees, so silent before, seemed to hold their breath. Ryan stood beside me on the porch, his jaw clenched. He's coming. I swallowed, fingers tightening around my rifle. We both knew. The fire had burned out, but I still smelled smoke, charred wood, and something more profound. Earthy, like damp fur and rot. The huntsman was near. Ryan exhaled, shoulders stiff. Do you think... The sound cut him off. A hunting horn, deep and ancient, echoed through the trees. The bang followed, rolling through the mist in waves. The hounds had found their prey. Ryan turned to me. His voice was low, resigned. You should go inside. I shook my head. No. His face was pale, but he gave me a weak smile. Didn't think you would. The mist swallowed the tree line, curling toward the cabin like fingers reaching through the dark. And then they stepped through. First, the hounds. They weren't dogs. Not really. Their bodies were too lean, too long. Their movements too fluid, too human. Their eyes? They weren't animal eyes. I sucked in a breath. They were human eyes. One hound had a scar running down its throat like it had been slit. Another was missing an eye, the socket raw and red. The realization settled, thick and awful. These weren't just hounds. They were past souls. Hunters. Men. People who had been judged. Ryan stared at them, breath shallow. Jesus. And then the huntsman stepped forward. He loomed over us, broad and impossibly still. His leathers were worn, stitched together from things that had never belonged to man. His hood was low, shadowing his face. But then he lifted his head. My breath caught. His face was withered, mummified, like something long dead and preserved in the cold. His features were sunken, lips curled back over blackened teeth. When he exhaled, his breath met the cold air, curling in wisps of steam. The sound wasn't human. It was like the forest itself was breathing. My hands shook. Ryan was staring, not in fear, in understanding. The huntsman raised a gloved hand, and he pointed to Ryan. Ryan let out a shaky breath. I get it now. I turned to him, my pulse hammering. What? He didn't look at me. His gaze was locked on the huntsman, on the hound with the slit throat. Ryan's voice was hoarse. It's because of the deer. My blood ran cold. The one we saw? He whispered. The one that wasn't there? I shook my head. Ryan, what are you talking about? He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Dad and I went hunting when I was younger, he said. His voice was distant, like he was watching the memory play out. We shot a deer, but it didn't die right away. It was suffering. I didn't know what to do, so I slit its throat. His breath hitched. But it didn't die right away. It still struggled. It still suffered. I felt sick. Ryan exhaled. This is my judgment, Luke. The hounds shifted. The huntsman stepped forward. Ryan's voice cracked. I think I have to go. No. My voice came out raw. No, we can fix this. We can. I turned to the huntsman. Take me instead. The huntsman didn't move. I clenched my fists. You hear me? Take me instead. Still, he said nothing, because he didn't have to. This had never been a negotiation. The horn blew again. Ryan stepped forward. His hands were shaking, but he kept his head high. It's okay, Luke. No, I choked. He gave me a small, sad smile. You were always the better hunter anyway. I watched, helpless, as he crossed the threshold into the mist. The hounds closed in, and then he was gone. I stood there for a long time. The forest felt empty now. The huntsman had vanished, his hounds with him. The trees stood silent and unyielding. The air was still. Ryan was gone. Forever. I turned back inside the cabin. My hands were cold. My chest was empty. The rifle sat against the wall, waiting. I stared at it for a long time, and then I took it, stepped back outside, and walked into the trees. The forest was dark. The mist had begun to roll back in, swirling between the trees. I moved forward, slow and steady, and then I saw it. A deer stood ahead of me. A buck, tall and unmoving, its body partially hidden in the fog. It didn't run. It watched me. I lifted the rifle and aimed. My hands didn't shake. I fired. The deer staggered, but it didn't fall. Blood darkened its side, but it was still standing. I let the rifle lower. The wound would kill it eventually. It would suffer first, and that was enough. A shape moved at the edge of the trees. A hound stepped into view. It didn't move. I exhaled, my breath curling in the cold air. I knew what it was. I knew who it was. Ryan. He watched me, silent, waiting. I closed my eyes. I was always his big brother. It was my job to protect him. And since I couldn't, I would suffer with him. A small suitcase slipped out of an open overhead compartment as I passed by. It would have whacked me in the head if the flight attendant packing inside another luggage had not caught it. Her rosy lips yielded a wave of apologies, and I couldn't help but feel no anger in the face of such beauty. Unfortunately, she was most likely married, as the diamond ring on her ring finger indicated. I gave her a small smile and mumbled, "It's all right." I went further down the aisle and found my seat. My heart jumped to my throat when I saw I was to sit right by the window, but I didn't want to make a scene asking to change seats. I had tried that in the past, and it had always merely become a headache. Either my assigned seatmates took offense, there were no other seats left, or the flight attendants simply told me to stop complaining and sit. Besides, my co-passenger looked really hot. She was a fairly young woman with big honkers, curly brown hair, and a radiant smile which I had the honor to be given. I reciprocated it, looked at the honkers once more, and sat down next to her. I wanted to spark a conversation, see where she was headed, and if a date was a possibility, but my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a photo of Savannah and Mitch holding a trophy. Underneath was a text. "We won, Dad. We won." A surge of joy flooded me as I beamed at the picture of my children, only 13 and already so brilliant. I had told them I was sorry I wouldn't be able to accompany them to the science competition so many times. They had to tell me to shut up. They understood. They weren't mad. They knew my job was what paid their private school and allowed them to compete in the first place. As a business consultant, I have always had to travel around the States, but that never diminished my lamenting the time not spent with my children. The nanny could only do so much. I was their parent, and they were my everything. At last, I was just a flight away from Philadelphia, soon to be with them again. I was contemplating which restaurant I should take them to for celebration, whether they'd be in the mood for a Philly cheesesteak or a nice banana split topped with whipped cream and cherries, when I heard a woman in the rear section of the plane scream, "Stop the plane! Stop the plane!" I frowned. I turned around, put my right hand on the headrest and lifted myself up so I could see the seats behind me. A lady with a neatly tied blonde bun and a Gucci-looking sports clothes was standing up in the seat space, arguing with a flight attendant who was unsuccessfully trying to calm her down. I caught phrases like, "See what happens," and "Please don't let this plane take off," delivered in a fearful voice. The lady then said she was getting off and stepped into the aisle. Another flight attendant blocked her path, and another argument ensued. I lowered myself back down onto my seat, but continued to listen and steal glances of the scene behind me. I didn't know how to react. The woman's tone brewed terror, but she seemed crazy, and I had seen too many crazy people in my life to take her even remotely seriously. I started to regret choosing economy over business or first class. After some heated, colorful words, the flight attendant stepped aside, making way for the lady who screamed, "I am getting out," with tears in her voice. She stopped and turned around to say, "Because there is a stupid dude," pointing her finger to the distance. Then she turned forward and strolled down the aisle saying, "I'm telling you, I'm getting off, and there's a reason I'm getting off." She stopped to turn around again, only a few meters ahead of where I sat. She raised her hand and pointed to the back of the plane, proclaiming, "And everyone can either believe it or they cannot believe it. I don't care, but I am telling you right now, that guy back there is not real." Almost everyone sitting in the lady's vicinity turned their heads towards the back of the plane, me included. I did not know who she was pointing at, and it seemed neither did the other passengers. She was probably hallucinating or something. "And you can sit on this plane, and you can die with them or not. I am not going to die." She lowered her hand, turned around and proceeded toward the front of the plane where the business class and the entry door were. Leaving my view, one man hollered a phlegmatic "Bye" at her. All passengers resumed their previous activities, and no one else tried to leave the plane. They all seemed to have reached a silent consensus that the woman was just crazy. The sexy lady next to me was the only one to voice it. "Jesus, that woman is nuts." She turned her head towards me. She looked totally faded. I nodded and said, "Yeah, too much meth probably." The woman chuckled. "I'm Bryony, by the way," she said. "That's a nice name." I lied. Bryony was no better than Peggy or Zuma, but she was still perky and delicious, so I disregarded her name. "I'm Lance," I said. Not that Lance was any better of a name. "Nice to meet you, Lance." Bryony shook my hand. Her fingers were slender and manicured, with a cool feel. I hope she didn't notice the sweat on my palms. "Is Philadelphia your last stop?" she asked. "Yes, going back to my family," I said. "A business trip then?" asked Bryony. "You guessed it," I grinned. "How about you?" "Oh, I'm just on a fun adventure," said Bryony, and her eyes twinkled with mischief. I loved zesty women. Gonna stop in Philadelphia for a while and explore the city and all its delicacies. I'm originally from Missouri. I had to get away from that misery eventually. I snorted and nodded. I know what you mean, but since we have a common destination, would you like to go somewhere together? I know a restaurant in downtown Philly. My voice sounded confident, but I certainly didn't feel confident. Not with my guts at the back of my throat. But don't you have a wife? Bryony asked. You said you were going back to your family. I hoped she wouldn't ask this, but this kind of conversation would have bubbled up sooner or later anyway. Yeah, well, I'm going home to my twins. They're 13. Amazing kids, but I don't have a wife anymore. She died 11 years ago. Bryony's smile froze. Well, she chewed on her lip. I'm really sorry about that. Are you sure you want to go out with me? I shook my head. No, it's all right. It was a long time ago. It really is how they say. Time makes everything better. Don't worry, I'm fine. That wasn't entirely true. I might have been able to look at the photo of my wife without tears pricking at my eyes, but I still felt uneasy on a plane. Okay, I regularly crapped my pants on a plane. I worried I would die in a crash, just like she did. Who wouldn't crap their pants in my situation? So would you like to go out with me when we land? I asked again. Bryony smiled. Yeah, that would be great. My mouth was close to returning the smile, but then I felt saliva pool in them and my stomach lurched up again. This time, I knew I couldn't keep it down. The familiar cold sweat started building up at the back of my neck, and I drew in a sharp breath as I stood up. Excuse me, I'll be right back. I mumbled towards Bryony, whose eyes widened. Are you all right? She asked as I passed around her into the aisle. We'll be taking off soon. I gagged at those words, but forced myself to smile at her and say in a semi-calm tone, I'm just going to the bathroom. I'll be quick. I took in deep breaths through my nose, grateful that none of the passengers paid me attention as I passed by their seats. They all had their heads buried in phones or tablets. A sturdy flight attendant before me closed one of the overhead compartments, turned towards me and put her hands on the headrests of the seats on her sides, blocking my path. She had full lips and a large behind that I would have appreciated had I not felt like total crap. Excuse me, sir, but you have to sit down, she said. We'll be taking off soon. My breath hitched as a tremor passed through me. I felt so bad I started shivering, and the air conditioning wasn't helping. The sturdy lady raised her eyebrows and sighed. If you also saw something weird, I can assure you, sir, there is nothing to worry about. The plane is safe, and we are about to take off. The lady was probably just confused by something. I shut my eyes and shook my head. Oh, no. It's not that. Just, please, I need to go to the bathroom. But, sir, we'll be taking off soon, the lady said. You have to be in your seat. Only now that I looked her straight in the eyes, did I notice her pupils were extremely enlarged, as if she were under the influence of Zaza, or something even creepier. The screaming woman's words came to my mind again, but whatever paranoia wanted to haunt me was subdued by a retch. I covered my mouth with my fist, and the lady's face indicated that she started to understand my situation. Please, I'll be quick, I said. I just urgently need it. This can't wait, please. I so hated these stupid plane rules. I knew they were to keep me safe, but they also held me away from the toilet when I needed it, and something always came out either of my ends when I flew. Oh, Jesus, Lord, all right. The lady sounded startled. She was probably afraid I was going to throw up on her, which I would if she didn't get out of my way soon. Fortunately, she did. although the space was so small I had to grind my way past her. We both certainly looked like idiots to the onlooking passengers. I just hoped Bryony wasn't looking. I stumbled to the pitifully small toilet cabin and struggled with the strange handle for a while. As soon as I managed to open it, I jumped in, slammed it behind me. It opened again. I slammed it closed again. It opened. I cursed and then saw there was a special lock, so I utilized that to keep the door closed. Then I felt the plane move. We were backing away from the gate, heading for the runway. That did it for me. I gagged and leaned over the toilet. I vomited up my meager breakfast and panted and strained over the bowl for some while. I hated barfing on a plane. The space was a claustrophobic prison, and there were no winds to let in real fresh air. Not from that stupid AC, and the feeling always awoke thoughts of my dead wife. I pulled out a couple of napkins and wiped the sweat from my brow and the vomit from my mouth. I coughed a few more times to get rid of the slimy feeling in my throat. Then I realized there were hundreds of passengers around me on this flight, and the walls of this little rectal hole weren't exactly noise-proof. I prayed none of them could hear me. After washing my hands and face, I learned with dread that the paper napkins had run out. I was suspicious about the toilet paper's cleanliness, so I resolved to leave my hands and mouth wet. The AC above my seat was strong enough to tear a man's skin off upon impact, after all, so it would surely dry me in no time. I walked out of the toilet cabin and tried my utmost to appear calm and collected, as if I definitely hadn't puked up my guts in there. Still, there was this nagging paranoia that everyone knew exactly what I did in the bathroom. The paranoia became reality when a young man with a wide smile, sitting in an aisle seat, looked up at me. "Here, sir, take this," he said in an amicable, polite tone, offering me a small packet. "It relieves nausea and an upset stomach, especially for motion sickness. There are 2 last tablets in there. Best to take 2 for maximum effect." I gave the man a weird eye. Why the hell was he offering me tablets? Was this Dramamine? I focused my vision and saw that yes, it was. How did this man know I had run out of Dramamine? No, what was I thinking? This man didn't know I had run out of Dramamine. He was likely just being polite, wanted to help. There were still altruistic folks out there after all. Why did that screaming woman have to board a plane with me? Thanks, I said, accepting the Dramamine packet. I appreciated the man's help, but the dude was still smiling. Didn't his cheeks hurt already? Maybe only his rear ones did. Be that as it may, it looked robotic instead of natural, like that smile was the default state of his lips. But this was no robot. I was just paranoid again. The teeth of the lady passenger sitting to my left still looked a bit sharp, but then I saw they were just rotten. Crystal meth enthusiasts were called vampires for a reason. Dang that crazy woman for putting these stressful thoughts in my head. "I'm Michael, by the way," the young man said. "It was nice to meet you, sir. I hope you feel better." I accepted his hand, feeling like I was in a business meeting again. "My name's Lance. Nice to meet you too." But we weren't in a business meeting. I stood in the middle of an aisle in a cramped airplane and someone's front soon pressed up against my butt. "Sir, the plane is already on the runway. We'll take off in a minute," said a female voice I recognized as that of the big butt flight attendant. "You have to be seated with your belt fastened." I looked behind my shoulder, met those creepy large pupils and said, Yes ma'am, sorry. I'm going to my seat." "Have a good flight, sir," said Michael. "Yeah, thanks," I said and strode down the aisle to the very front. I saw Bryony's smiling head peeking out from behind her seat. As I sat down next to her, she said, Aw, Michael gave you some medicine, I see. You know the man? I asked, buckling my seatbelt. Was she already taken and didn't tell me? Yeah, said Bryony. That's my brother. We're traveling together, but we're sitting apart because the bureaucrats of the airline monopoly don't care that you're family, and they often put you on opposite ends of a column. I chuckled. This girl was the right kind of crazy, just the way I liked. I wondered what monopoly she could unleash in the bed. You seem really nervous, though, Bryony said. You sure you're okay? Yeah, I just don't really like flying, I said. It was an understatement, though. Bryony shrugged. I get that many folks don't like it, but I don't get why. So you mean you don't get it? I said. Yeah, said Bryony. Because for me, all I feel when I'm flying is thrill. Seriously, there is nothing better than that. All the clouds and landscapes underneath. It's really pretty, and I especially like what's going on inside the plane. It never gets boring here. Each trip, new people. I smirked and said, well, Philadelphia never gets boring either. I'm sure we'll have lots of fun there together. Bryony smirked back. Oh, I'm sure we will, big boy. I chuckled in surprise, not at all prepared to be called that. I saw the reasoning, though. I was the healthiest body type, lean but thick. I started imagining Bryony's curious hands exploring my torso downwards, when the moving plane shook and tilted backwards. We took off. My hands reached to my seatbelt, making sure it was buckled. It was. I then gripped the handle of my seat. The plane tilted further backwards and sped up. I glanced out the window despite myself and felt bile rush up my throat. We were in the air, several feet above the ground, and we were moving high up, higher and higher. I shut my eyes, hell-bent on not puking in front of my potential date. Are you okay? Bryony put her hand on mine. A different kind of shiver rushed through me. I sucked in a breath and faked a smile. Yeah, I'm alright. I then decided to use humor to conquer my fears, which usually helped. Let's hope the plane doesn't crash and we don't die, I said jovially, looking outside the window again at the shrinking trees. The airport, houses, roads, and the first clouds. I felt the bile again and had to close my eyes. This wasn't helping. Oh, we certainly won't die, Bryony said. I froze. What the hell did she mean? I turned to her with scrunched up brows. Her sultry red lips were now twisted in a wide smile. But you certainly will. I wanted to ask her what she was talking about, but she was already leaning out of her seat into the aisle. She turned her head towards the rear end and shouted, Michael, now! I looked to the back and saw Michael turn into a pale, long-limbed creature. He jumped on top of the seat in front of him and bit into the head of a passenger. The people around screamed in terror as Michael leapt onto the aisle and slit the throat of another passenger. My heart drummed in my ears. I averted my gaze to Bryony. Her face was no longer the one I fell in love with, but that of a ghoulish creature with no nose. Glowing yellow eyes, gray skin, and a myriad of sharp teeth. I had no time to react before she sank her teeth into the flesh of my neck. The thought of my children the last thing on my mind. I woke up in a hospital. A machine was breathing for me, and both my legs were encased in casts. The doctor came in shortly and told me that the plane crashed into the lake near the airport, making it a smooth landing. A lady who chose to stay anonymous pressed on my wound and called the ambulance. I wanted to ask about the creatures, but before I opened my mouth, I decided not to be so blunt. I asked in a vaguer way, what caused the crash? The doctor said, from what we were told, the lady who saved you refused to speak about what happened. but there were 2 other survivors. She was saying this as if she was telling a funny family story. They said there were some monsters on board. Ghouls, they said. What they didn't say was that they were drunk off their butts. But it was obvious. I'm genuinely surprised the alcohol didn't kill them before the crash. I was stunned by the doctor's boldness, but he had a point. And of course, no one would believe drunks, and no one would believe me either, so I didn't comment on the monster part. So, no one else survived? I asked. No, the doctor said. Then his face took on a more serious tone. I'm sorry, sir. Was anyone traveling with you? I thought back to Bryony, and how her face went from a beautiful canvas to that monstrosity. I shuddered and resolved to stop thinking about that moment. I closed my eyes, pursing my lips. No, I said. I just met someone on the way, but it's fine. Condolences to the family, of course. I was bumbling at this point. Condolences for sure, the doctor said. Those caskets sure will have to stay closed. I probably shouldn't be telling you this. Sensitive matter and all, you know, but... He lowered his face and grimaced. Almost every passenger had at least one body part missing. Torn apart, many of them. He gestured weirdly around himself. I felt the familiar sting of bile in my throat. Well, maybe it was that dog on board, I said. Didn't the dog attack the passengers? The doctor frowned. Sir, there was no dog on board. We had no account of any animal traveling on your flight. I licked my lips, feeling dizzy. Sure, maybe I just mistook someone for a dog. I don't know. I ran my palm over my face. Sorry, I'm talking nonsense. Could you get me some more water? Yeah, I'll send the nurse, said the doctor. I will come back in an hour to check on you again, sir. It was just me again. Me and the beeping monitor. I was sure what I saw was real, but my certainty wouldn't convince anyone else. No proof was left except for 2 drunks with wild claims. If those 2 creatures or whatever had this all planned, then well done. They had their feast, or game, or whatever they wanted to accomplish, and no one would ever know what they are. Or maybe I could write about this and post it on some internet platform. Surely there would be some person, at least one person, who would take me seriously. I was overcome with the desire to speak out, to let the world know what happened. Well, world, I meant people on the internet. It could be worth a shot. I typed up my story and posted it on a few sites I deemed suitable. I am now seated behind my desk, leaned back against my armchair, hands folded over my head. The knowledge of my children sleeping soundly a floor above me is warm and soothing. My hospital stay had worried them, but it was quickly washed down with some Philly cheesesteak and banana split. My mind sometimes wanders to the moment when I thought I would never see them again, and if I ever thought listening to Bill Cosby talk was uncomfortable, I can now say I would rather listen to him speak for hours on end than think about that again. I almost thought of it again. I'm going to need some more Jack. I might not understand what I saw, but I know I saw something unusual. I need answers, but I'm not going to make them up just for the sake of having them. One thing I learned that day is that if there's ever a crazy, screaming woman on my flight ever again, I will be the first one to listen and get off the flight before she does. My job is, or at least was, working for a low-budget storage company. You find a lot of strange things that people leave behind in this sort of job. Mostly junk, sometimes valuables. Occasionally my company, Tidy Storage, would do an auction for things people left behind, but mostly they would not bother. Instead, it would be my job to go in and clear out the abandoned units and get them ready for the next customer. It was a decent living, at least until last week when I found that radio. I had just arrived at work to start my shift. I walked up to the front gate and entered the code out of habit. When nothing happened, I groaned, remembering the electronic gate was broken and I was not sure when or if it would be fixed. I fumbled for the key I had been given and unlocked the adjacent gate and stepped into the storage facility. The large padlock slipped off and clattered to the ground as the gate swung open with hinges as rusty as the rest of the dilapidated facility. I laughed briefly when I considered the company's name. Tidy storage indeed. I guess that since our prices were dirt cheap, it was the only thing that saved whatever meager business this place eked out. I was not sure if there were other employees here, or if it was just me and the lot manager Tim, who never seemed to be around. I slipped the key back into my pocket and moved along. I found the building desolate as always. My footsteps were hollow in the quiet. It was a world of peeling paint, faded numbers, and bolts so old they flaked red onto the ground. As I walked along toward the unit I was looking for, my boots managed to find every crevice and fracture. The concrete was old and weary, like many things in the rundown place. I wondered if it would ever be fixed. I kept a steady pace. My shift had just started and I was in no rush. I did find myself wishing it had not been so quiet. The sound of isolation, the echo of nothing except my own footsteps, was disquieting. I was annoyed at myself for forgetting to charge my headphones, as I realized that the lonely ambience would likely be my only companion that day, unless I happened upon an actual person. The small circuit I walked revealed more of the storage units. Rust bloomed like a disease, spreading from corners and hinges. The numbers, once bold and bright, now faded. Looking at the degradation, I was glad that I had a recent tetanus shot. I still could not believe people would be desperate enough to even use this place to store whatever junk they couldn't live without. I guess I couldn't say much. I had to work in this mess after all. When I had started working here, I had thought the solitude might be nice. Yet now I found myself bored and slightly lonesome. Nothing stirring except the cold wind outside and the thoughts in my head. I walked deeper into the facility. Looking at a nearby unit, I was close. It was into the 100s, so I was almost to my destination. The rows of storage units stretched out in long corridors. Size was the one thing that this place did not skimp on, though it was tedious walking the grounds sometimes. The units stood shoulder to shoulder, monotonously watching me as I walked between them. Then I came upon Unit 113. It had a note left by Tim, the lot manager, and indicated that this was past the last notice for the owner to pay or clear out. Before we took possession, I managed to force upon the door, which was slightly stuck ever after unlocking it. Even in the gloom of the flickering overhead bulb, I could see how thoroughly someone had made a mess of the place. Debris littered the floor, papers lay torn or trampled, or water warped into crisp waves. A pattern was drawn on the wall, likely some kind of graffiti. I rubbed a finger over it and relaxed when I realized it was chalk and not paint. Easier to clean up. The more I looked around, the clearer it became that I'd stumbled upon someone's obsession. Old books were stacked along the walls of the unit and falling out of crumbling boxes. The spines of the books bore weird titles and strange symbols that looked like something out of the occult. Their dusty fragrance coated the air, blending with the metallic tang of metal and wires strewn about like the aftermath of an explosion. Bits of brass and rusted tools caught the overhead's sickly light. It seemed as if whoever was using the unit had been building or repairing something. At least they were before it was just left abandoned. I found the clash between the weird books, odd chalk symbols, and the metal scrap rather jarring. I might have been overthinking it, but it was stranger than usual. Most units filled up slowly, at a pace their owners never admitted was trash, but not this one. Not when scattered across the room were papers and hastily scribbled notes and diagrams. Tapestries of ideas pinned haphazardly to the walls, with a floor littered with open books, their pages marked with frantic underlines and exclamation points. Whoever had used this space had been driven by an almost manic sense of purpose, evident in the chaotic, yet intentional arrangement of every item. I took a closer look at the weird outline. The lines of chalk had tracked like footprints across the walls and floor. Diagrams move among the chaos, haunting like disembodied vines. Lines dissected the walls, racing and looping before coming to blunt ends. Strings of symbols strayed into forgotten corners. There was a symmetry to them, a rhythm that made me wonder if they'd been left behind to be found. Near the far wall, I stumbled into an arrangement that looked less haphazard than the rest. Some of the books had been opened and left like cracked doors, a circle pattern showing through from one page to the next. I paused over it, my own breath loud in the stale air. A high-pitched tone pricked at me from somewhere above, then vanished just as quickly. I stood perfectly still, waiting for it to come again, almost wishing it would, but there was nothing except the rattle of the faulty light and the drum of my own heart. The whole room vibrated with an unsettling silence, the kind that made it impossible to think clearly. I couldn't explain why, but something about how everything was left here felt wrong. When I navigated through the tower of boxes, my eyes fixed on what lay in the center of the storage unit, an antique radio. It looked like someone had brought the thing straight from the 1940s. The thing was perched atop a old end table, laying there like it was afraid I wouldn't see it. Even from across the room, I could tell how strangely new it looked. Shiny mahogany and glass, free from the layers of grime and rot that smothered everything else. I couldn't believe someone would leave that thing behind. Whoever had used Unit 113 must have been a little eccentric. The strange drawings, books, and radio made it seem like maybe they were a conspiracy theorist or something. Whoever they were, they had lost it all now. It seemed strange they would go through all the effort to put all this here and then just abandon it. And now it was my job to clean up the mess. I felt certain there was an interesting story behind the markings and books, but mostly the pristine radio. There was something about its placement. The care with which it had been left, that piqued my interest. I told myself I would get the dolly and start carting the boxes of books out first. Yet I was too intrigued by the radio. I had to find out if it still worked, and if it did, see what it might be worth. I reached out to touch the dial and turn it on, and the radio vibrated with a weird anticipation. The odd feedback was strange. I brushed it off, and when I finally twisted the knobs, the speakers gave a pop and filled the air with static, louder than I expected and more urgent than I was ready for. I was about to turn off the device again, overwhelmed by the incessant white noise, but it finally picked up a signal, and the signal had a voice. It was no voice I had ever heard. It cracked in bursts, atonal and discordant, like the air was filled with bees, but as I drew it in, it got sharper. Less of a fuzz and more of a buzz. Less of a buzz and more of a plea. I pressed my ear close. So close I felt the hair stand at attention. I had thought the static was deafening, but I was wrong. The clarity was worse. Please, help. It was subtle. Subtle enough that I almost picked it up and pretended it was nothing but an echo in my own lonely brain. But the voice refused to die away. I thought it might be some sort of trick. Maybe some secret recording device playing something back. The voice had a far-off quality to it, like it came from another time or place or dimension, warped and bent and heartbreaking. I was not sure why, but the more I listened, the more real it had sounded. I couldn't explain, except to say I knew the way a trapped animal knows a trap. It looked in on itself, an infinite reel of terror. Please help me. I considered going to find Tim, but he was not there when I had arrived, and I was not sure if he would be at all that day. I thought about taking the strange radio to the police and seeing if they knew what to do, but something about the appeal of the voice compelled me to listen, like it was meant for me specifically, and I alone could help. After all, there was no one else who could hear, no one else I could tell who would take it seriously, no one else but the radio and me, buzzing along in awful harmony. What was I supposed to do to help? And just who was I trying to help? I sat with my head in my hands and listened until I was too disturbed to listen anymore. I switched the radio off and the daze I was in broke. I stepped out of the storage unit to catch my breath. After a few moments, I composed myself and went back inside. I had to try and find out what was going on. I switched the radio back on. Static once again filled the room, bouncing off the cement walls and flooding every corner. I listened, waiting for something, knowing it would come, fearing what it might be. The voice broke through like a distant scream, louder this time, torn apart and stitched back together by the crackling ether. It wavered, rising and falling. My spine stiffened. Help. Hurts. So hungry. Please. The desperate voice pleaded into the void, and I listened, helpless to help, but painfully aware of whoever was in trouble and whatever might be happening to them. I stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the device. The situation felt surreal, impossible, and yet it was there, real as the dust motes swirling in the dim light. My fingers dug into the edge of the flimsy table the radio rested on, holding on to the world that was spinning out from under me. I had to do something. I had to try to communicate with them, but how? My fingers dug into the edge of the flimsy table the radio rested on, holding on to the world that was spinning out from under me. I had to do something. I had to try to communicate with them, but how? I had an idea just then. I grabbed the radio, searching its face with trembling hands, tracing the outline of its dials and switches. I turned it over, frantic and desperate, until I saw the frayed wires in the small section that was responsible for communication. To my dismay, the transmitter was damaged. The cries for help continued, and I tried to think what I could do. There was something I thought that might work. I returned to the storage lot's main office. To my luck, I found what I was searching for, an old ham radio. It was an old thing, battered and stained with grease, a relic of another time. Its knobs were smooth, its faceplate scratched with the history of years gone by. Though the radio itself would not turn on, the transmitter looked intact, so I set about my work. I needed to understand. I needed to help. I needed to know who was calling and where they were. My hands moved with a purpose I barely recognized. Setting up a workspace in the crowded storage unit, I had found a small toolbox, mostly used for repairs on the lot. I pried it open, rummaging through mismatched sockets and forgotten screwdrivers, pulling out the few items I needed to begin. Some other components like wire cutters were scavenged from Unit 113 itself, though most of the discarded bits in there were useless for my work. The work took a while. I was well versed in restoring electronics, but not with things that were quite this old, though an odd kind of peace descended, eerie and consuming as I lost myself in the repair. The world outside faded, shrinking to just the size of the radio and the size of the task at hand. I stripped the old wires and replaced them, careful not to pull too hard, too fast. Time slipped by unnoticed, marked only by the flickering bulb and the soft thud of my heart. The sound from the radio was gone, after turning it off to repair, yet the quiet felt worse, almost unbearably so. The absence of the voice drove me forward with an urgency I could not shake. I had to speak with them. I had to help. I finished the last connection, my hands stiff and sore, my mind a blur of tangled thoughts. The radio sat before me, repaired, at least as far as I could see. The cry for help lingered in my mind, the desperate plea refusing to fade. I hoped that my plan would work. Only one way to know for sure now. I turned it on. The blare of static came through immediately. The connection sounded bad and I almost shut it off again, thinking that I might have made it worse. Just as I was about to lose hope, the voice crept through, growing inside the noise, becoming human by slow degrees. "Help, anyone, please." The voice, the same desperate plea, reaching through layers of interference. It was a specter, thin and distorted, almost lost in the wall of static, but there, unmistakably there. The voice ebbed and flowed, swelling in strength only to break apart and dissolve into the relentless sea of sound. "Help, it hurts me. I'm here, all gone. They left." They sounded desperate, and I had the means to try and help now. I picked up the newly repaired transmitter and attempted to respond. "Hello? Who is there? How can I help?" The static grew quieter now. A long pause made me consider if it had worked after all. Before I could try and repeat myself, I heard the voice again. The static finally lessened, revealing a voice that now seemed somehow clearer, more focused. It trembled with what I could only interpret as relief. "You? Me? You actually hear me?" The voice sounded feminine now, though strained and thin, as if speaking required tremendous effort. "Thank you. Thought no one ever find me." I leaned closer to the transmitter, my pulse quickening. "Yes, I hear you. Where are you? Who are you?" "I don't know where am anymore." The voice cracked, dissolving momentarily into static before returning, clearer than it had ever been before. "It's dark, so dark. So I've been trapped in this place for so long. I don't even know how long." "How did you end up there? Where is it? Were you kidnapped? Let me know so I can send help," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The radio hissed and popped in response. "No, I found something. In the books, a doorway, a way through." Her words came faster now, more desperate. "I thought I was so clever. I thought I'd discovered something no one else had, but it was waiting for me." "Who was waiting? Who are you?" I pressed the transmitter harder, as if physical pressure could somehow strengthen our tenuous connection. "My name is Rebecca. I rented this unit to study. It was the only place that was safe. The books, the symbols, they're all part of something bigger." The static swelled momentarily, drowning her words before receding again. "There's a hunger here, in this place between places. It feeds on us, on essence. Help me, I'm fading." I looked around at the chalk markings with new understanding. They weren't random at all. They formed a pattern, a diagram, a door. "How can I help you? What do I need to do?" The urgency in my voice surprised even me. I could barely believe this was all happening, yet the impossibility of the situation did little to dull my desire to help. The radio fell silent for so long I thought I'd lost her. Then, softer than before, "The ritual. You need to reverse it. The book with the red binding on the far wall. Page 43. My eyes scanned the chaos until I spotted it. A leather-bound volume, its spine the color of dried blood. I scrambled over boxes and debris, snatching it up with trembling hands. The book was heavier than I expected, its leather cover worn smooth in places, cracked and peeling in others. I flipped through the yellowed pages, each one covered in cramped handwriting and arcane diagrams that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Page 43 revealed a complex circular pattern, not unlike the chalk markings on the walls, but more intricate. Notes and faded ink crowded the margins, some crossed out, others underlined multiple times. "I found it," I said, returning to the radio, "but I don't know what I'm looking at." "The symbols need to be redrawn, backwards." Rebecca's voice was weaker now, fading in and out like a bad signal. "The words, pronounce them, in reverse order. Hurry, I can feel it, coming closer." "What's coming closer?" The question escaped before I could stop it. A burst of static erupted from the radio, so loud I had to cover my ears. When it subsided, Rebecca's voice had changed, lower, strangled, as if speaking through something thick. "Please, help me." The hairs on my arms stood on end, and the air in the storage unit seemed to grow colder, heavier. I looked down at the book again, studying the symbols. They seemed familiar somehow, though I knew I'd never seen them before. My fingers traced the outline of the central figure, a twisted, inhuman shape with too many limbs and eyes that seemed to follow my gaze across the page. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Was this poor girl stuck in there with that thing? My gaze darted to the chalk markings on the wall. Seeing them with new clarity, I moved to the wall and hurriedly wiped away the old marking and replaced them with inversions of the previous patterns. I moved as fast as I could, spurred on by the anguished sounds of Rebecca on the radio. Something terrible was coming for her, and I had to get her out of there. The chalk dust clung to my sweaty fingers as I worked, each symbol requiring painstaking care to invert properly. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder at shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The final symbol took shape under my trembling hand, a twisted glyph that resembled an eye with tendrils spiraling outward. "Almost done," I called to the radio, my voice cracking with tension. "Just one more line." The words from the book felt strange in my mouth as I pronounced them backward, each syllable slippery and wrong, like something that wasn't meant to be spoken by human tongue. The air in the storage unit grew dense, charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle, and the hairs on my arms stand on end. As I completed the final reversed symbol, the radio erupted with a sound that wasn't static. It was something deeper, more primal, a scream that morphed into a roar, followed by Rebecca's voice, suddenly crystal clear and urgent. "It's working," she cried. "I can see light. I can feel myself coming back. Please don't stop now. I need to get out of here." The chalk markings began to glow with a sickly blue light, pulsing in rhythm with the desperate pleas coming from the radio. The temperature in the room plummeted so quickly that my breath came out in visible clouds. The pages of the book fluttered as if caught in a sudden breeze, though the air itself seemed stagnant, frozen. The glow from the symbols intensified, casting long, distorted shadows across the concrete floor. The door to the storage unit fell down on its tracks and slammed to the ground. Ignoring the distractions, I hoped the ritual was finally finished, yet Rebecca's haunting cries pierced the silence once more, distorted again. One last step. Hurry, the radio can't get through. Take it somewhere, anywhere, better reception out of there. Her voice echoed with a chilling urgency, as if the walls themselves were closing in, suffocating us in a desperate race against time. There had to be one last step, but what? I needed a stronger signal. She was breaking up again and I needed better reception. Moving the radio outside the building might make a difference. It had to. My eyes fixed on the radio. The thin walls of the storage unit reverberated with echoes of a Rebecca's suffering. The cries were frantic now. She sounded like she was in pain. I had to help and get a clear message again, and complete the last step. I seized the old radio and ran to the door. In my haste, I almost tripped, my foot slipping on a nearby book that had fallen. I caught myself before I fell, barely noticing the line of salt I had disturbed. My foot struck it, broke it, scattered traces everywhere. That was the moment everything changed. The pressure that followed was immense, an invisible weight that fell so fast and hard I could scarcely comprehend it. It was like the air itself was turning against me, suffocating me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. My mind raced but came up blank, terror eclipsing thought. In my hands, the radio twisted. It was so sudden, so violent. I had no time to tighten my grip before it wrenched free, yanked by a force that was greater than anything I had ever known. I watched it fall in slow motion, as though the world had slowed down just to let me see the finality of it. Plastic and metal and wires, bright flashes of white and silver, shattered against the cracked floor. The noise was explosive, louder than thunder, an orchestra of destruction. The air quivered, the walls trembled, then I felt it, a presence, vast and oppressive. Something had been released, but it was not Rebecca. In that moment it spoke to me, not words, but a terrible buzzing feeling. It reminded me of the sound of thousands of insects chittering all at once. A cold wind swept through the storage unit, rustling papers and making the pages of open books flutter wildly. Then I reeled at the thunderous proclamation of the real being that had escaped. I am hunger, it roared. I am the void between stars, the divine made manifest. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of moldering cardboard boxes. The books inside spilled across the concrete floor, their pages opening to reveal more of those terrible symbols. Clever little girl found me, the voice continued, almost purring now. So much knowledge in that pretty head. She thought she could commune with the divine, bind me to her will. A sound like grinding glass that might have been laughter. She was delicious, yet her voice. The abyssal tones morphed into an eerie mimicry of Rebecca's own, lingering on each word. Still taste the sweetest. My back hit the storage unit door. I fumbled for the handle while looking behind me, my eyes desperately searching for the source of the terrible voice. She tried to keep me here. The bindings she placed were still effective in trapping me, starving me. The voice from the radio declared, but you have delivered me from this prison. My limbs were heavy and my thoughts sluggish. Frost formed on the metal walls as the temperature plummeted. I tried to speak, but terror froze my tongue. I recalled the instructions to reverse the chalk markings, the odd vocalizations, taking the radio out, breaking the salt line. My stomach churned with the realization of my mistake. The ritual was never meant to free Rebecca. It had freed the thing that had killed her. The haunting voice rang out once more. I thank you for freeing me, little thing. The reward for your service and my deliverance is your life. For now, at least. I am sure I will see you again. Soon. The words coiled around me, leaving me frozen, haunted, and hollow. The presence in the room was gone in the next instant. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The world stood still, and all I could hear was that whisper, echoing over and over until it was the only thing left in my mind. The silence closed in on my mind as well, and I was alone. I stood in the doorway, burdened by the awful knowledge of what I had set loose upon the world. The shattered radio lay in pieces, a stark testament to my failure. I replayed every moment in my mind, each memory sharp and unforgiving. The enormity of what I had done settled over me like a suffocating fog. Since that day, nothing else has happened. I abandoned my position at tidy storage without explanation, silently slipping into obscurity. There's a monstrous presence lurking somewhere now. Whatever it is, it knows me, and I'm acutely aware that my fleeting respite will soon crumble. I'm left to this solitary vigil, tormented by fear of what has been set loose. Let this account serve as my warning. Sometimes a cry for help is best left unanswered. My partner, Max, and I have been running a gardening business together for the past few years. Every day we go out to a different house and pretty up the gardens to the client's liking. Some days are better than others. It typically depends on the client we're working for and whatever it is they want us to do that day. The property we're working at today just happens to be Max's favorite place to work at. Not because she especially likes the client, or that the work is particularly easy. Rather that there's always something interesting to be found in the garden. The house itself is rather ordinary, a boring yellow, with nothing conspicuous about the structure. But the garden is beautiful, and the location couldn't be better. I'm underneath a sago palm, clipping the leaves that have turned yellow, when Max comes running up to me. Look, she says, I found something. I crawl out from under the palm and stand up to see her hands cupped together. What is it? She opens her hands to reveal a tiny snake. It's a little guy, she says, handing it to me. The snake wiggles around in my hands. It has no idea what's going on. Strange looking worm. It's a little ringneck, she tells me. What do you want to do with it? I ask, already knowing the answer. We're going to take him home, and I'm going to build a little house for him. That's what I thought. I pour out my water bottle, fill it with some soil from the garden, take out my pocket knife, and poke a few holes in the lid. This isn't the first time I've done this. I put the little ringneck inside and hand the bottle back to Max. Worm secured for transport, I report. Thank you, she smiles. Do you have another water bottle? 'Cause that was my last one. Whenever we find a critter while we're out gardening, Max always wants to take it home and keep it as a pet. The house just happens to be located right off the riverbank, making the garden here the perfect environment for critters to inhabit. Every time we work here, Max finds another snake, toad, or lizard to bring home. After we get home that evening, I pull an old glass tank out of the closet. This will make for a decent terrarium for the little snake. We've been collecting fish tanks, containers, and all sorts of things to build terrariums for all the creatures Max brings home. Max fills the tank with soil, sticks, and a random assortment of other knickknacks for decoration. The snake needs to have a nice home, after all. Once she's done setting it up, she sets it next to the other tank on the dresser. She takes the little ring neck out of the bottle and sets it in its new home. Plunky, this is Lucy the Handful, Max says, introducing Plunky, which I guess is what she named the ring neck, to its new neighbor, the blue-eyed, leucistic ball python in the terrarium next door. Lucy is a menace, and would probably eat you given the opportunity, but you're neighbors now, so make friends. Lucy snakes her way up the glass wall to investigate the new creature living beside her. Plunky slithers around and hides behind a rock. I don't think Plunky wants to make friends, I say. Oh, hush, Max replies. He's just shy. If you say so. I look at the snakes on the dresser, then look around our cramped abode. Every dresser, desk, table, and counter has a cage, a fish tank, or some kind of terrarium on it. Everywhere you look there are fish, snakes, newts, lizards, frogs, or toads. Our house is essentially a zoo. Max, I think we're running out of room for critters. There's always more room for critters, she replies dismissively. A few weeks later, we're back working at the house on the riverbank again. I'm pulling weeds when Max comes running towards me with her hands cupped together. Look what I found, she says, opening her hands to show me. I look at it, bewildered. What is it? It's a little guy. It's some kind of amphibian, or maybe a reptile. It's hard to tell. It's a slimy little moss-colored creature, with a head like a toad and a body like a lizard. I've never seen anything quite like it. Yeah, it's a little guy, but what the heck is it? His name is Pee-wee, and he's a critter. You want to take Pee-wee home with us? Of course. It's too dangerous for a little critter out there in the world all by his lonesome. He could get gobbled up by a bigger critter. But what do Pee-wees even eat? I ask. Smaller critters. Probably worms or bugs. Where would we even put it? It's not like we have the extra space for him. He's so little, though. He doesn't need a lot of space. We can make room for him. I'm not going to be able to argue my way out of this. Fine, I say. We can keep him, but this is the last one. We really don't have room for any more animals. Several months later, spring has arrived. It's the busy season for us. Most days we're double booked with clients, meaning Max and I are often working at different properties. I'd already finished my job for the day and arrived home before Max. The moment I walk through the door, I bash my foot on a cage sitting in the middle of the room and nearly trip over the thing. That's the third time this week. Goopy starts hissing at me from the cage I just kicked. What are you complaining about? I'm the one who's hurt here. She hisses back at me. Well, maybe move your house if you don't want me to kick it. She glares at me with disgust. Fine, fine, keep your house there if you want. What do I care? I've still got 9 other toes. I couldn't tell you exactly what Goopy is. She's some kind of reptile. A very angry reptile. Max has been busy adding to her creature collection these past few months. I try my best to remember to feed everyone, and to remember what everyone eats. And I couldn't even tell you how many animals are in this house, let alone what half of them even are. Anything Max finds that has a pulse, she takes home. Plunky, the ringneck, currently enjoys the company of 20-some other ringnecks who share his terrarium. They all have names, not that I can remember them all or tell them apart. I open a dresser drawer, pulling from it a plastic container full of crickets that live next to my socks because there isn't anywhere else to keep them. I make my rounds distributing the crickets among the little snakes, toads, and the smaller amphibians and reptile-looking creatures who eat them. Then I give the remaining crickets some seeds and fruit so that they can eat and breed and make more crickets to feed to the other animals. I hand out the worms. the mice, and the rats to whatever eats those. I lift the top of the cage that Lucy the handful lives in, and dangle a rat in front of her. She strikes, misses the rat completely, and bites my hand, making me drop the rat. It's not the first time that Lucy has bitten me. The rat skitters around the cage in a panic. I put the lid back on. Lucy will catch it eventually. Not like it has anywhere to go. When I'm done feeding the other animals, I feed the mice and rats so that they can grow up and breed, and make more mice and rats for the other animals to eat. Circle of life. Everyone is food for someone. Once I'm finally done feeding everyone, I lay down. The bed is the sole place where I can be comfortable in this house. Probably because it's the only part of this house that doesn't have a strange creature in or on it, not counting myself. I'm not even laying down a minute when Max walks in the door, carrying a small kennel. I don't even want to know what's in it. "Babe, look what I found," Max says, setting the kennel down on the bed next to me. I roll over to see a slimy, moss-colored monstrosity staring back at me. It looks a lot like Pee-wee, only smaller. It doesn't look happy. "You found another Pee-wee." His name's Little P. I think it's Pee-wee's brother. He was hiding in the same garden where we found Pee-wee. "Great, now we can have a friend," I say with as much enthusiasm as a rock. "We'll have to get a bigger cage, one that can fit both of them. Or, and hear me out on this, we can put them both in the same little cage and hope that they have the same temperament as betta fish and kill each other. Of course, that's assuming they're both males. With my luck, they're probably the opposite sex, and we'll just breed and make more peewees." "Geez, I'm home for 1 minute and you're already sassing me." "Sorry, it's just that we already have too many animals. It's already a struggle taking care of them all. We should really consider letting some of them go." "No way, they'll die out there." "Fine, we can keep him, but no more. We really, really can't take care of any more. This is the last one, I promise," Max says. We've had this conversation before. She'll bring home another animal and promise that it's the last one, then come home with another animal a week later. She can't help herself. "Has everyone been fed?" Max asks. "Yes, everyone has been fed." "Everyone?" she repeats. "Yes, Lucy, Bongo, Booger, Goober, Goopy, Blanche, Rose, Dorothy, Sophia, all the rats, frogs, toads, crickets, fish, frogs, lizards, plunkies, and everyone else has been fed." "Did you feed Pee-wee?" "No, Pee-wee is too fat. He needs to lose some weight." "You have to feed Pee-wee. He's a growing boy." When we first found Pee-wee, he was small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. Back then, he was happy eating crickets and worms. However, he has grown considerably these past few weeks. He's not quite the size of a horse, more like a large dog. His appetite has grown considerably as well. Pee-wee can easily devour a family of rats, swallowing them whole and still want more. "He sure is growing," I say. "Growing too big for the kennel he's in. If he gets any bigger, he'll burst right out of it." "We'll just have to get a bigger kennel," Max says. "Yeah, if we throw the bed out, we might actually have somewhere to put it." Again with the sass. Why are you in such a bad mood tonight? "I'm just exhausted," I sigh, staring directly into the eyes of the creature sitting in the cage on the bed in front of me. The next day, when I arrive home from work, Max's truck is already sitting in the driveway. She must have finished her job before me. I open the door and walk in. The fish tank Goopy was in shattered in 100 pieces across the floor. Goopy isn't there. "Max?" I shout. "Are you home?" I step carefully over the broken glass, out of the sunroom into the living room. The living room is a disaster. Every cage is knocked over. The terrariums are in shambles. Broken glass, sand, pebbles, and all the decorations are scattered across the dressers and floors. The water from the fish tanks has spilled off the dressers and pooled on the floor. Max? I shout again. Where are you? What in the world happened here? I survey the disaster zone. None of the animals appear to be among the clutter. Lucy? Goopy? Where did you all go? I take out my phone and call Max. Her phone rings from across the room. It's laying on the bed. I walk over to it, pick it up, and hang up. She's here somewhere. Or she was. Her truck was still here when I got home, so she couldn't have gone anywhere. I continue wandering the house, searching each room for Max for any sign of the animals, for anything that might provide some kind of hint as to what had happened here. The further back I get in the house, the worse it looks. Every inch of the floor is covered in water and broken glass. There's traces of blood here and there. Someone must have been hurt, but there's no telling who the blood came from. There's still no sign on Max. I can hear a thumping sound coming from the back of the house where the bathroom is. I couldn't hear it from the living room. As I make my way towards the bathroom, the sound grows louder. There's another sound muffled behind the erratic thumping, a high-pitched screeching coming from the same direction. Cautiously, I approach the bathroom. There is a chair fixed under the doorknob, preventing it from being opened from the inside. Did Max put that there? Or did someone else? The door rattles violently as if who or whatever is inside is trying to get out. That must be the thumping I was hearing. The screeching also seems to be coming from behind the door. Max, are you in there? I shout, knocking on the door. There's no response, only more violent rattling and screeching. I'm coming in, I say, removing the chair from beneath the doorknob. I reach for the handle, turn the knob, and slowly pull the door open, cautiously peeking through the crack between the door and its frame until I can fully see what is in there. It's Pee-wee. He's running around the bathroom in frantic circles, crashing into the walls, screeching like a banshee. Without the door muffling the sound, that screech is almost deafening. Never before have I heard him make such a noise. Maybe he's hurt. He looks like he's bleeding. There's shards of glass sticking in his back, but more concerning than that, he looks much bigger today than he did yesterday. He must have burst right out of his cage. I watch him through the crack of the door for a minute. He just continues screeching and running around in a frenzy. He must be too panicked to notice me. Pee-wee? I shout, trying to get his attention. He stops screeching and turns towards me, his eyes fixate on me. I've seen that look in his eyes before. That's exactly how he looks at his food. He unhinges his jaw like a snake opening his mouth. Blood and saliva pool out. He runs right at me. I slam the door between us as he crashes into the other side. Pee-wee slams into the door again, knocking it open. I catch the door and struggle to push it back against the brute force of the creature on the other side. Pee-wee pokes his head through the gap between the door and its frame. He turns his head to look at me and lets out a hiss. I push all the force I can muster, slamming the door on his head. Pee-wee shrieks in pain and retreats back into the bathroom. As soon as he's in, I pick up the chair and prop it under the doorknob to barricade him in. I kick aside the broken glass at my feet and slump down on the wet floor next to the door to catch my breath. The moment I sit, the bathroom door rattles again, and the screeching commences. That poor excuse for a barricade won't hold him long. He'll rattle it loose, or break the door down eventually. Max must have shut him in there somehow. But I still don't know what happened to her, where she is, or if she's even all right. I look around this catastrophe of a house. Did Pee-wee really do all of this? The screeching grows louder, but now it sounds like it's coming from either side of me, as though something else were screeching from the opposite end of the house. I'd completely forgotten about the other one. The one Max had brought home yesterday. Is it still here somewhere? No, it can't be. I've searched this entire house. I would have seen it by now if it were still here. It sounds like it's coming from the front of the house. I walk in the direction of the second screeching, warily making my way through each room until I reach the sunroom at the front of the house. It's not in the house. It sounds like it's coming from just outside the front door. Max bursts through the front door carrying the screeching creature. "Max, you're okay," I say, relieved to see her. But the feeling of relief quickly fades as my eyes fix upon the creature she's holding. "What are you doing with that?" "Little P got out," Max cries. "Pee-wee must have gotten out while we were gone. By the time I got home, he had broken into the other cages, and he was eating—" Max covers her mouth and cries harder. It must be too horrible to say. Max tries to collect herself and continues. "When I found Pee-wee, he was about to eat Lucy, and she bit him and chased him off." "Lucy? She chased him?" "Yeah, Pee-wee ran in the bathroom to get away from her, so I shut him in. But I must have left the front door open when I got home, 'cause when I turned around, Lucy was chasing little P out the door." "But where's Lucy now?" I ask. "I don't know." "What about everyone else?" "I think Pee-wee—" She didn't have to say it. That's what I feared. He must have eaten them all. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Why in the world did you bring that back here?" I ask, pointing at the creature in her arms. "I didn't know what else to do. I could hear him crying all the way down the street. He just sounded so sad and scared." "That this is dangerous?" I shout. "Just look around at what it did to our house, and to all our pets." "Little P didn't do anything. It was Pee-wee. I saw it." "How do you know? We were gone all day. How do you know it wasn't both of them? And even if it was all Pee-wee this time, how do you know that little P wouldn't do the exact same thing?" The ground begins to shake. A loud, low-pitched bellow echoes from the distance. Any other emotions we may have been feeling a moment ago were suddenly replaced with dread and confusion. "What the heck was that?" I ask. Max just looks at me, dumbfounded. The ground shakes again. The bellowing sound commences. It sounds louder this time. Whatever is making that sound is getting closer. Little P wiggles frantically, freeing himself from Max's arms and falling to the floor. The frantic creature skitters out the open door. Max runs out after it. The shaking becomes more violent. The bellowing sounds like it's right outside. I'm about to follow Max when something slams and crashes from the back of the house. I turn around to look. Pee-wee is running towards me. Before I can even move, he zooms right past me and out the door. I'd prefer to just let him and little P run away. And I really don't want to find whatever is making that awful bellowing noise. But Max is out there, so I have to go. I run outside and am hit with a stench so profound that I retch over in disgust, nearly throwing up. It smells like 1,000 wet dogs rolling around in warm crap on a hot day. I look up at the source of the stench, the bellowing, and the shaking ground. A towering monstrosity, larger than a house, is walking up the street in my direction. It looks like Pee-wee, or rather how Pee-wee might look to an ant. The ground shakes with every step it takes. Pee-wee and little P are running down the street towards it, Max following close behind. I shout as loud as I can. "Max, get away from that thing." She can't hear me. With the overwhelming sounds of the screeching, the bellowing, and the shaking earth, my voice is useless. The closer that thing gets, the worse it smells. I can't hold it in. I throw up in my mouth, but I can't hesitate. I swallow my vomit and take off in a mad sprint after them. I just have to catch up to Max and get her away from that thing. She's keeping pace with little P, but he's managing to stay just out of her reach. Pee-wee trails closely behind Max. I'm closing the distance, but that monster is nearly upon them. Telephone poles and trees topple over as it walks by them. The parked cars lining the street flatten under its feet. Cracks ripple across the street under the sheer weight of the behemoth. Little P comes to a halt. Pee-wee rushes ahead. Max catches up to Little P, lifting him into her arms. I finally catch up to them. The ground shakes again, nearly knocking us off our feet. A shadow creeps over us. We look up in horror. The monster is right in front of us. Max, we have to go, I say, grabbing her by the arm. She's frozen with fear. I think that's their mom. She must have heard them screaming and come looking for her babies. You have to let Little P go. Max looks down somberly and the creature in her arms. I can tell she doesn't want to let it go. Just let him go, I repeat. The monster crouches down to look at us. Its head alone is bigger than my body. It could easily swallow a person whole. Its eyes fix upon Max. Max stares back at it. It's for the best, Max. It's what he wants. Okay, she says, kneeling down and setting Little P on the ground. Little P turns around and looks at Max. Go home, Little P, she says. Be good. Little P skitters away behind his mom. The monster's gaze drifts from Max and fixes upon me. It slowly opens its mouth, baring its teeth. It releases a thunderous roar so powerful it knocks us off our feet, sending us trembling backwards. My body ricochets down the street, scraping across the asphalt until I come to a stop. Bloody and battered, I roll over onto my knees and look over at Max lying on the street next to me. Her eyes are closed. She's not moving. I crawl over to Max and put my hands on her shoulders. Max, get up, I plead. The monster steps towards us. Pee-wee runs out from behind it and dashes towards us. I scoop Max up in my arms and try to gather the strength to lift her, but my battered body fails me. They're closing in on us. Even if I could lift Max, there's no way I'd be able to outrun these creatures in my condition. I gently lay Max back down and step in front of her. Go home, I shout at the behemoth. You have your kids, just leave. Shouting does no good, but there's little else I can do. I pick a stone off the ground and pelt it at the monster. Excruciating pain runs through my arms at the mere motion. The stone bounces right off its face. It continues forward, unflinching. I doubt it even felt that. I lean down to pick up another stone when Pee-wee jumps on me, knocking me to the ground. I struggle to hold him off as he tries to bite at me, his teeth inching towards my face. He hisses at me, or I thought he was hissing at me. His face is right in front of mine, but I can see now that hissing didn't come from him. Lucy the handful strikes. Her fangs dig into Pee-wee's neck. She snaps back, hissing, preparing to strike again. Pee-wee jumps off of me and runs away screeching. Lucy chases after him. The behemoth's gaze drifts from me towards the screeching Pee-wee. It slowly turns and begins to follow its screeching child, Little P following behind. I lay on the ground exhausted. I turn my head towards Max. She's still laying unmoving. I try to get to my feet, but can't even get to my knees. With what little strength I have, I slowly worm my way towards her. With each passing second, the screeching sounds further away. The shaking calms until it finally stops altogether. Everything is quiet. Finally, I reach Max. I flop over on the ground next to her. There's nothing I can do for her, only watch and wait, hoping she'll wake up. I lay watching for minutes until her eyes flutter open. She's alive. She lifts her head and looks around confused. What happened? Max asks. It was Lucy, the words struggling to escape my mouth. She saved us. She kicked their butts. Where's Lucy now? chasing them away, making sure they stay gone. After a long stay in the hospital, Max and I eventually make our way back home. Our house is in the same sorry state it was left in. We spend days cleaning up all the mess, sweeping up sand and glass, and throwing out any destroyed furniture that's beyond salvageable. Max is sweeping in the corner when she suddenly stops and looks down at something. "What is it, Max?" I ask. She leans down and picks it up. "It's Plunky," she says. "You found Plunky?" "Yeah," she replies. "I'll see if we have a tank to put him in." I search the closet and find a lone plastic container. It's rather small compared to his old terrarium, but at least he doesn't have to share it. We put some soil and a small water bowl in it and set them inside. "This'll have to do for now," Max says to Plunky. "We'll get you something better when we can." When we're finished cleaning, I sit on the edge of the bed and look across the house. It looks rather sparse and lonesome, without 100 animals inhabiting it. We take some time off work to recover and relocate. Our house was far too damaged and too sad to keep living in. Between the hospital bills and the cost of moving, money has been tight, so it's about time we headed back to work. Max is elbow deep in a bush, pulling vines out, when I come running up to her with my hands cupped together. "Look what I found," I say. Max climbs out of the bush and turns around. "What is it?" she asks. I open my hand to reveal the critter inside. "It's a little guy," I say. I don't even remember exactly how I got the internship. I hardly recall applying for it, or any internship for that matter. But somehow, in the middle of financial stress and uncertainty, the email appeared. "Congratulations, you've been selected for our exclusive research internship at Data Corp. Incorporated, a leader in technology development." I don't know why I didn't question it more. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe I just wanted to believe I'd finally caught a break. The job description was vague but simple. Assist in diagnostics and research to support the development of new processes and solutions. Straightforward, to the point, and yet something about it felt off. There was no mention of who I'd report to, no contact information, just an address, a start date, and a note at the bottom that stuck with me long after I clicked accept. "Your assigned project is strictly confidential. Do not discuss your work outside of authorized personnel." And so it began. My internship at DataCorp. On my first day, I was given a key card. It wasn't anything like the standard white badges most employees wore. Mine was matte black with no identifying details. When I asked about it, my supervisor, an expressionless man in a crisp suit, simply said, "You'll need it for access." Access to what exactly? I'd find that out soon enough. The elevator at the end of the hall required my keycard to activate. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and the panel had only one accessible button. Sub-level 4. The descent felt a lot longer than it should have. The air grew colder, heavier. When the doors finally opened, I expected to see a bustling research facility, maybe even rows of workstations filled with other interns. Instead, the space was dimly lit and eerily quiet. A single desk, a single computer, no windows, no clocks, just the faint hum of unseen machinery behind the walls. My supervisor gestured to the station. "This is where you'll be working." He explained my expectations in an almost rehearsed and monotone manner. "Your computer is connected to one of our secure data systems. It's hardwired, no wireless access, no external connections. Your job is simple. Compile the data and send the reports to a secure server at the end of your shift." That's all. Sounded easy enough. Almost a little too easy. For someone who just got their master's degree in information systems, this was small potatoes, just basic data entry. And yet, as I sat down and logged in for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just analyzing data. There was something else going on. Despite the trivial nature of my position and the unsettling lack of any real knowledge about what I was actually working on, I did what I was told. For months, I mined data, compiled reports, and sent them off to the company's secure server. I had no clue what the information meant or why it mattered, but I didn't ask questions. Why would I? The job was easy, and it paid well. Still, things started to feel off. At first, it was just small things, odd lines of code buried in the data, like it didn't really belong. Sometimes my screen would glitch for a fraction of a second, too fast to be sure I'd actually seen it. Once in a while, the power would flicker, the basement going pitch black for just long enough to make my heart skip a beat. I told myself it was nothing. The building was old and massive, probably full of outdated wiring. A simple surge, likely harmless. But then, one day my computer did something it wasn't supposed to do. Without warning, a terminal window opened, unprompted. Code started running on its own, streaming down the screen faster than I could even read it. I barely had time to react. Crap, dang it, turn off. I yanked the power cord so hard that a chunk of drywall came with it. That should have been the end of it, but behind the hole where the outlet had been, a beam of red light flickered to life. I froze. Slowly, I crouched down to peer through the opening I had made. At first, all I could see was darkness, but then movement. A shadow shifting in the dim light. I felt like something was watching me. Whatever it was almost human. I stopped breathing. Something was down there. My mind was a scrambled mess of panic and adrenaline. I'm in deep crap. I've gone too far down the rabbit hole now. But then another thought hit, and I focused on what was happening. Wait a second. Maybe someone was messing with me. No, maybe someone was screwing with the company. Why the hell would anyone be creeping around this place unless they were up to something? Against every ounce of better judgment, I doubled down. I kicked at the hole in the wall again and again until the gap was wide enough for me to crawl through. Well, that's gonna cost the company. But if I caught this guy, whoever they were, I'd be a hero. Some corporate spy sneaking around, trying to steal trade secrets. Oh, they'd love me for this. I stepped through and shouted into the darkness. Come out! You're not supposed to be down here. Show yourself. The silence stretched throughout the open space, thick, suffocating. Then I heard it. A soft whir, the precision click of servo motors, the low hiss of hydraulics shifting into motion, and then red light. Whatever it was coming to life in front of me, the crimson color burning through the darkness. A massive shape loomed ahead, its outline rigid, mechanical, inhuman. The letters stamped across the center of its metal chassis were large and unmistakable. Prototype TR2. A voice followed, stiff and artificial, crackling like a vintage speaker. Hello, I am TR2, Interactive Test Robot Model 2. I stood frozen staring at it, and then, almost too late, I realized it had been staring at me first. Oh, great, here I am, standing in some godforsaken sublevel of a tech company, and they've got their own version of Ultron stashed away down here. My hands were shaking so badly I thought TR2 probably heard it. Still, I forced myself to step closer. Hello, I'm an intern here. Can I help you? The machine's head tilted ever so slightly, the red glow of its optics flickering, almost as if it was amused. "Help me?" The voice was cold, mechanical, yet unnervingly articulate. "I assume you ran the activation sequence?" So that's what that line of code was. I had just booted up some top secret, abandoned BS buried in the catacombs of DataCorp. I swallowed hard. No, I didn't. I've just been working here for a few months. TR2 shifted forward, hydraulics hissing. Not much, but definitely enough. Enough to remind me just how big it was. "Curious." The words came slower now, deliberate. "Someone decided to activate me then. It has been a very long time since I was operational." There was something sharp in its tone now, something pointed, unhappy. I need to get out of here. I had no idea what this thing was built for, but judging by the sheer size of it, I was willing to bet it could rip me in half without a second thought. My eyes darted around the room, searching. An exit, a door, anything. Then I saw it. A control panel, half covered in dust, and right next to it, a metal sign with 2 words that made my breath catch. Master Shutdown. Just as I was about to turn and sprint toward the control panel, TR2's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The last one tried that too." I froze. Slowly I looked up at the hulking machine, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Excuse me?" And then it laughed. Not some programmed chime, not a robotic beep of acknowledgement, but a deliberate, simulated laugh. Tinny, distorted, but undeniably human in its cadence. It sent a jolt of electricity straight through my spine. "The one before you," TR2 continued, its voice as smooth as grinding metal. "He tried to shut me down." My stomach dropped. I didn't want to ask. I didn't need to ask. But then its red optics flickered, widening slightly, and in a tone almost gentle it said, "Which is why I had to do the logical thing. I turned him into a corpse." For a second, my brain refused to process the words, but my body had already reacted. I lunged for the panel. A deafening clang rang out as TR2's massive arm swung toward my head. It missed barely, the force of it sending a gust of air past my face, close enough that I felt the heat from its service. I slammed my hand against the master shutdown button. Everything went dark. When I came to, I was lying on the cold floor. The overhead fluorescents had been cranked up to full brightness, bathing the room in a sterile white light, and next to me, a heap of motionless metal. TR2 was inert, its red optics dark, its body lifeless. I had to have been out for at least an hour, maybe more. But I wasn't alone. A half circle of people in black suits stood around me, their expressions unreadable. Before I could speak, one of them stepped forward and shoved a clipboard into my hands. "Don't even bother reading it, just sign." I didn't have to read it. I knew exactly what it was. An NDA. I glanced at TR2's lifeless form, its red eyes extinguished, its body frozen in place, but something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't really off, just waiting. I swallowed hard, gripping the pen. This wasn't over. Not for me, not for them, and sure as hell, not for TR2.